The Author's POV. Chapter 121, Hidden Dungeon, 1. Yawning, a white mist escaped from my mouth. Although it was midwinter, only now that I was awake early in the morning did I fully realize that winter was upon me. Perhaps it was because I was less sensitive to the cold, it never truly hit me until now that it was already that time of the year. 6:30 a.m. Checking my watch, I rubbed my hands together as I sat on a bench. Currently, I was at the train station, patiently waiting for the air train to arrive. Moreover, apart from waiting for the air train, I was also waiting for someone to come. Kevin. I had already texted him beforehand that I was waiting for him today at the train station. Although the events with Gilbert had happened not so long ago, he should have already made a full recovery. Therefore he should be able to make it without a problem. The only thing that I wanted to know was whether he received my message or not. TSSSS. It's snowing. Snapping me out of my thoughts, extending my hand forward, I watched as an ice crystal gently landed on my jacket and melted straight after. Glancing at the falling snow in the sky, I couldn't help but softly mumble to myself. 5 months, huh? I've been in this world for 5 months. Watching the ice crystals continuously fall from the sky and land on my jacket, I couldn't help but look back at what had happened these past few months. Time sure flies. Going from a reclused introvert to exploring dungeons, creating companies, finding comrades, meeting a new family. Really, fate is truly strange in many ways. Who could have ever guessed that my life would change so much in a matter of 5 months? I really couldn't explain how I felt at this moment. Everything sort of felt like a blur. Vroom. Snapping me out of my thoughts, the sound of an air train gently landing on the platform of the station resounded across the area I was in. Frowning slightly, I glanced around me. However, noticing that I was the only person in the station, I couldn't help but be slightly disappointed. MHHH. Did I perhaps miscalculate? I really thought that Kevin would have without a doubt shown up considering what had happened with Gilbert, but did I perhaps misjudge something? Shaking my head, I discarded such a notion. No. I created Kevin, how could I have judged wrongly? Perhaps he was still on his way and something was holding him up. Like for example, an old grandma had fallen down the stairs and he was helping her stand up. 6:34 a.m. Glancing at my watch, and seeing that there was only a minute left before the air train left, my brows knit tightly. Just where in the wadash? Am I late? Just as I was about to give up and leave the train station and go back to the lock, I heard a voice coming from behind me. Without looking behind me to see who the voice belonged to, I smiled and said. Just barely. Lock station, departing. Clank. As the doors of the air train closed, lifting up in the air, it soon smoothly picked up its speed and disappeared into the distance. Sitting on the opposite ends to each other in the air train, Kevin and I quietly looked at the ever-changing scenery outside of the train. Neither one of us spoke a word. Currently, the world outside was now dyed in white as the snow coated the rooftops of every building and house in the distance. It looked truly beautiful. Glancing away from the window, I couldn't help but notice how empty the train was as apart from me and Kevin, no one was present. Perhaps because it was early in the morning or because the destination was far, the train was completely empty. After a while, breaking the silence, Kevin looked at me for a couple of seconds before saying, So, where are we going? Looking back at Kevin, without answering him immediately, I responded with a question of my own. Before that, can I take your presents as you agreeing to my deal? Hearing my question, Kevin didn't reply immediately. Staring at his feet for a couple of seconds, clenching his fists tightly, he eventually nodded. Yes. Great. Seeing Kevin nod his head, a big smile appeared on my face. Resting my cheek on my hand, I calmly said. We're going to the Clayton Ridge. Surprised, Kevin's brows couldn't help but shoot upwards. The Clayton Ridge. Yeah. The same place where I got the seed of limit and the cakey style. However, contrary to last time, I was going on further upwards of the Clayton Ridge. The Clayton Ridge was huge, and when I mean huge, I mean huge. We're talking like thousands of kilometers long. Compared to the place where I took the seed of limit and cakey style, I was actually headed a lot further than that. About a 3 hours journey from the lock, approximately 1,800 kilometers in terms of distance. Glancing at me in confusion, Kevin couldn't help but frown as he asked. Is that where the sword art is? Smiling, I nodded my head in confirmation. Yup, and we're going to the middle part, so you better rest as much as you can, as you're going to need to save up all your energy for when the real challenge comes. Once again looking at me in confusion, Kevin asked. Challenge? Shaking my head, as I leaned on the window and stared at the world outside that was dyed in white, a light chuckle escaped from my mouth. What? You're telling me that you expected me to just give you a 5-star sword art without putting in any effort? In the first place, I was only bringing him to the place where the 5-star manual was located. If I had the 5-star manual with me, I wouldn't have asked for him to meet me this early in the morning to go to Clayton Ridge. Understanding this, opening his mouth, Kevin tried to find words to say, but after a while, he shook his head and said, No. I get it. Raising my brow and noticing Kevin's crestfallen expression, patting him on the shoulder, I reassured him. Don't worry, I've got it all planned out, so you will definitely get your sword art. After all, if you don't get it, I won't go to Amora. Looking up at me for a couple of seconds, Kevin nodded his head and softly said, Okay. Just relax for now and let me handle the rest. Staring at Kevin in front of me, I couldn't help but sigh inwardly. I could tell that what had happened with Gilbert had taken a toll on his mental state. As we spoke, I couldn't help but notice the impatience in Kevin's voice. Although he was trying to hide it, his subtle gestures, such as the way he clenched his fists or nervously looked outside the window from time to time, were enough of an indication for me to understand his mental state at the moment. He was definitely desperate to increase his strength so that never again would he feel so weak and desperate at the hands of someone else. I too shared the same sentiment as him, as I understood how being powerless felt. It wasn't that great of a feeling, if I had to be honest. Fortunately for him, I wasn't lying when I said that I had everything planned out. If things will go according to my plans, perhaps this could be one of the easiest dungeon raids in history. Touching the insides of my jacket, I felt a thick rectangular object resting in between my body and jacket. Clenching it tightly, I couldn't help but think to myself, this will be the key to completing the dungeon without any problems. Desiccation, Clayton Ridge, Roa. Wawam. Lazily stretching my body, I glanced at Kevin and with my hand nudged him to stand up. We're here. All right. Nodding his head, Kevin stood up and followed me out of the air train. After 3 hours of sitting on a train, Kevin finally calmed down and returned to his regular serious self. Ha. Instantly, as soon as I stepped foot outside of the train, a wave of fresh air brushed against my body, causing me to slightly relax. Compared to the polluted air of the city, the air here was much cleaner and fresher. It truly felt great. Disrupting my moment of peace, Kevin spoke. So where are we going? Glancing at Kevin, I pointed towards the town below us and suggested. Let's first grab something to eat in the town below before going to our destination. Trust me, the walk is going to be very long. Thinking for a bit, Kevin eventually nodded his head. Although he wasn't sure about where they were currently going, if the road was as harsh as Ren made it out to be, then it wouldn't hurt to fill their stomachs before leaving. If you say so. The Author's POV. Chapter 122, Hidden Dungeon, 2. Inside of a densely packed forest, two individuals calmly walked through the heavy vegetation. Of the two individuals, one stood at the front looking at a large map made out of paper, whilst behind him, another individual followed him with a confused look on his face. Are you sure we're headed in the right direction? Scratching my chin, as I looked at the map before me. Tilting the map sideways, with a hint of doubt I responded. Should be. Taken aback, Kevin couldn't help but say. Why don't tell me that we're lost. No, well, maybe. But most likely not. Smack. Facepalming, an extended sigh escaped from Kevin's mouth. He was starting to regret his decision. Not even halfway through the journey and they were already lost. Just what kind of guide was this? Noticing Kevin's action, I shrugged my shoulders. In my defense, I didn't have much to work with. Although I had a general idea of where the dungeon was, well, let's just say that a lot of the important information on how Kevin found the dungeon was skipped in the novel. After all, back then when I was writing this part of the story, I basically directly skipped to the moment Kevin found the dungeon. Thus, because of how lazy I was back then, I was currently in a pickle. Fortunately, I had a few reference points to work with. A river, a large bent tree and a cave. Those were the things I was looking out for. Kiam, can I just ask why you're using a paper map instead of your phone? Coughing a couple of times, Kevin glanced at me and asked me something that had been on his mind ever since leaving the small town below. Looking back at Kevin, brushing my hair to the side, I lazily said, "What difference does it make? In the end, with this, I can just save my phone's battery." Taking out my phone and pointing towards the top right corner, I said, "Moreover, good luck finding a signal in the middle of nowhere." Raising his hands in resignation, Kevin said, "All right, do whatever makes you comfortable. I was just curious as I've never seen anyone use paper maps anymore." Briefly glancing at Kevin, I shook my head and continued to observe the map. Fair enough. I would have used my phone if there was a GPS signal that would directly show me the path I had to go. Sadly, such a thing didn't exist. So, I just chose to use a map as that was what I used to use back on Earth. I guess old habits never die. Let's see. Crouching down on the ground and placing the map on a rock, I squinted my eyes and made sure I was still on the right track. If I'm not wrong, we are actually headed in the right direction, and all we needed to do is walk for a couple of more kilometers until we find a river. Turning the map slightly, I traced a blue line on the map, stopping until a certain point. Thereafter, we are to walk along the river all the way until we find the largest tributary, and from there go hike up until an oddly bent tree can be found. The cave of the dungeon should be right behind the tree. All right, I've got it, follow me. Cross-referencing with the map a couple of more times, I nodded my head and urged Kevin to follow me. "You figured things out?" "Yup, if nothing goes wrong, we should be able to arrive there in about half a day." "All right. Southwest, this is the place." "Yep." Standing in front of a large bent tree, Kevin and I sat down on the ground and recuperated some energy. The sun had already started to set and night was quickly arriving. Taking a couple of energy bars from my dimensional space, I handed one to Kevin and opened another one for myself. "Here." "Thanks." Taking the energy bar, Kevin quickly opened it and took big bites out of it. Looking at the cave hidden behind the tree, he couldn't help but ask, "Southwest, is this the place?" Munch, munch, yep. Scarfing down the energy bar in my mouth, I quickly nodded my head. After walking for half a day and following the instructions that I had written in my novel, I was quickly able to find the right location. Moreover, now that Kevin was here, using my book as a reference point, I was able to correct any mistakes I made. Regarding the book, I had to say, future me was really smart. Whenever I went in the wrong direction, I would always just shout, "Wrong direction," and with me seeing this in the book, I was able to discard that path and quickly find the right path in no time. Hats off to you, future me. Alright, let's go. After resting for 10 minutes whilst recuperating some of the energy we spent hiking all the way here, standing up, I urged Kevin to follow me. Patting his pants, Kevin nodded his head and stood up. Okay. Thus, the two of us walked through the cave. The formation was perfect. Kevin at the front and me at the back. With Kevin's overwhelming abilities, he should be able to take care of any monster that showed up before us, and I, with my sword art, could swiftly deal with the mob-like monsters present. Well, that was if I was planning on doing anything. In reality, there really shouldn't be much for me to do. Patting the book in my hand, I couldn't help but smile. What's the point of wasting time fighting monsters when you can just skip them? After walking for a while, we stopped at a fork road. There were 8 paths to choose from and they each looked identical. Turning around, Kevin glanced at me as he asked, "Which path should we take?" Without hesitation, I immediately pointed towards the 5th pathway. The 5th one. This time I was confident with my answer, as from the moment we entered the cave, I knew exactly where to go. Moreover. Stop. Huh. After walking for 5 minutes, placing my hand on Kevin's shoulder to stop him, ignoring the confusion in his face, I placed my finger in my mouth and quietly whispered, "As soon as you turn left, 2 horned sheep will immediately attack you." Pausing slightly and glancing downwards, towards my red book, I continued. "There is 1 male and 1 female sheep. The female sheep will wait from behind whilst the male sheep will be the one that will attack you first. The safest and most efficient way to get rid of them would be for you to immediately duck down and stab towards the male's stomach, and whilst the dash." Cutting me off mid-sentence, Kevin couldn't help but look at me weirdly. Wait, what are you talking about?" Raising my brow, I nonchalantly said, I'm just telling you what will happen and what you should be doing to quickly resolve the upcoming danger." "Yeah, I get that part. What I don't get is how you know all of this. Moreover, what are you doing with your hands?" Tilting my head, I glanced at Kevin in confusion. "I'm reading." "How can you read when there's nothing in your hands?" Huh. Glancing at Kevin in confusion, I waved the red book in his face. Although for obvious reason I wasn't going to show him the contents of the book, I wasn't going to hide its existence. After all, I was going to use it quite often whenever he was around. I mean, it's not like I could hide a thick red book in plain sight. I, of course, didn't need to use the book as Kevin could probably finish the dungeon alone, but why would I not want to exploit this cheat if it saved time? If you have cheat, use it. That was my motto. Still, although one should use their cheat, they shouldn't do it carelessly, as that could lead to bad consequences. Especially if it was a book that allowed someone to see 10 minutes in the future, things could get quite messy. Actually, considering that it only displayed Kevin's future, I guess it wasn't that tempting for others. Either way, as I dangled the book in front of Kevin's face and seeing the blank look on his face, I realized that something was wrong. Can't you see this? See what? Squinting my eyes, I was taken aback for a moment. He can't see it. Surprised by this discovery, a faint smile appeared on my lips. Interesting. I didn't know that the book had this other function. I guess it made sense if you thought about it. After all, this was an item that wasn't supposed to belong to this world. It wasn't strange that Kevin couldn't see it. Still, this made things much easier for me. So, snapping me out of my thoughts was Kevin's confused voice. Realizing that I was looking like a complete fool, smiling at Kevin, I brushed my behavior off as a joke. I'm kidding, was just messing around. Frowning slightly, Kevin didn't bother asking any more. All right. Though I wasn't joking about the horned sheep part. Didn't I tell you I had a skill that enabled me to see in the future? Taken aback for a moment, and recalling the conversation I had with him a week prior, Kevin nodded his head slightly. How could he forget? One of his biggest secrets was exposed because of this. Yeah. So you're telling me that you just used your skill? Nodding my head, I quickly pushed Kevin forward and urged him to follow my instruction. Bingo. So quickly do as I told you. Sigh. Sighing out loud, taking out his sword, Kevin nodded his head. Okay. The Author's POV. Chapter 123, Hidden Dungeon, 3. Ooh. Standing on top of two giant furry carcasses, Kevin exhaled as turbid air escaped from his mouth. By the side of his face, a droplet of sweat dripped down from his cheek. Good job. Looking upwards, I couldn't help but praise Kevin. It only took him 2 minutes to dispatch two D-ranked monsters. Although he had my instructions, it was still a very impressive feat, something that I, with my E-strength, could probably not be able to achieve. At least not without some preparations. Spurt. Removing his sword from the carcass of one of the two horned sheep, Kevin jumped down and moved next to me. Arriving before me, looking at me straight in the eyes, Kevin slowly said. So it's true. Taken aback by his sudden action, I couldn't help but ask. What's true? The fact that you can see the future. Stopping for a second, I nodded my head. Yeah. I guess you could put it that way. With the aid of the book I really could look into the future. Albeit only 10 minutes, it was still a small glimpse into the future. Glancing at Kevin, who seemed to be more convinced about his decision, I smiled inwardly. I guess this worked out in my favor. With the aid of the book, I managed to thoroughly convince Kevin about what I had previously told him. This could probably help me explain a few things in the future when I was planning on scamking him, making more deals with him in the future. Anyhow, that aside, let's see if there's anything good. Spurt. Walking towards the two horned sheep, I took out my sword and stabbed it straight towards where their heart was. Let's see. I was currently looking for a core. Because one of the requirements for going to Amora was a less than D-ranked core, I obviously needed to find one. Therefore, what better way to get one than through monsters that the protagonist killed? With his luck, there was a high chance I could find one today. Not so far from where I was, staring at me in confusion, Kevin couldn't help but ask. What are you looking for? Snapping my head in his direction, pointing towards the area I was cutting, I rolled my eyes. Isn't it obvious? Frowning slightly, after a bit of thought, Kevin carefully said. A core. Yeah. Spurt. Nodding my head, I no longer paid any attention to Kevin and turned my attention back towards the sheep. Either way, even if I didn't find a core, I could still sell the sheep for a good amount of money. Staring at me working hard at dissecting the horned sheep, Kevin wiped off the blood on his sword. Oh, okay. If you find one, you can keep it. Take it as extra payment for helping me. No need to share it. Thanks. Smiling at Kevin, I thanked him. However, that was merely a fake smile on my side, as I couldn't help but curse at him inwardly. Overpowered cheat-like bastard. Screw you and your system. With the aid of the system, Kevin could literally purchase any type of monster core that he wanted. All he had to do was use the shop feature in the system. Though it required points which he could earn from the quests the system granted him, he could still pretty much get whatever core he wanted without going through the hassle of saving money or going on a monster genocide. Therefore, to him, although monster cores were valuable, it wasn't enough of a temptation. After all, he wasn't really in need of money, as he had all the resources he could ask for from the system. The more I thought about it, the more I couldn't help but curse at myself. Just what in the world was I thinking when I wrote the novel? Fortunately, prior to entering the dungeon, Kevin and I had an agreement with one another that I would keep all the spoils from the dungeon raid. To which he nodded without hesitation. After all, the value of a 5-star sword manual was immeasurable. Hacking away at the horned sheep, for the next 10 minutes or so I tried to look for any sign of a core. However, after pretty much dissecting the whole sheep, I could only bitterly smile as I lowered my sword in defeat. Find anything? Nope. Patting me in the shoulder, Kevin encouraged me. Better luck next time. Shaking my head, I wanted to curse at him, but I eventually gave up. Wasn't worth the energy. Let's go, we still have a lot of distance to cover. Pointing further into the cave, I urged for him to follow me. Sheathing his sword back in his scabbard, Kevin nodded his head. All right. Walking deeper into the dungeon, placing my hand on Kevin's shoulder once again, I stopped him. Stop for a second. Grabbing a small rock from the ground, closing my right eye as I measured the distance in front of me, I took a step back and tossed the rock. Tlack. Swoosh. 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 At the same time the rock hit the ground, multiple sharp and unnatural objects flew to the other side of the wall and impaled themselves onto the hard bedrock at the opposite end. All right, let's go. Glancing at the sharp arrows that dug deep into the bedrock for a second, I urged Kevin to follow along. Those were poison-coated arrows that could kill even a less than C-ranked user if not careful. Unfazed by the current happenings, Kevin followed along. This wasn't the first time this had happened. In fact, this was already the 4th time that Ren discovered the traps and quickly disabled them. Oddly enough, the traps that were so well hidden didn't seem to bother Ren one bit, as he just nonchalantly triggered them left and right. It was almost like he could see the traps. Just what in the world is he? The more Kevin was with Ren, the bigger the confusion grew. He really couldn't get a read on him no matter how much he tried. In the end, Kevin gave up. His main focus right now was the 5-star sword art. Everything else came afterward. As they kept moving forward, around 2 hours into the dungeon, Kevin couldn't help but finally realize by what I meant when I said that there wouldn't be any problems even if we went to Amora. If they could avoid the danger, there really wouldn't be any issues regardless of how strong the monsters present were. Moreover, whenever there were monsters, I would quickly instruct him on what to do, and thereafter, following my instructions, Kevin would make quick work of the monsters. If I had to say so myself, we really worked well together. I would also help Kevin on occasions during fights. That was whenever there were too many monsters, or when a monster ambushed him from a blind spot. Glancing at Kevin, who was quietly following along lost in his own world, I quietly muttered. We should be close to the main area of the dungeon, so follow closely, okay? Slowing down his footsteps, Kevin tilted his head and asked. Main area? Nodding my head, I responded. Yeah. Currently, we were still on the outskirts of the dungeon. Actually, to even say we were in the dungeon would be a bit of a stretch. It was more like the tutorial part of a game before the game actually started. To really enter the dungeon, we need to first complete the tutorial area. SHHHHH. Placing my finger in my mouth, halting my steps, I put my hand to the side and indicated to Kevin to stop moving. We're here. Currently, we were at the end of a tunnel, right before the entrance of where the first boss of the dungeon was located. Leaning against the edge of the tunnel, stealthily peeking behind the edge of the wall, I soon noticed a furry creature resting at the center of the room. Flashing its terrifying eyes and flickering its tongue was a monster known as the Hodag. A monster that came from American folklore. The hodag was a fearsome critter-type creature that resembled a large bull-horned carnivore with a row of thick curved spines that protruded down its back. A thick green fur coated the monster's body as its two large fangs dripped saliva on the ground. According to legends, the hodag was said to be born from the ashes of cremated oxen, as the incarnation of the accumulation of abuse the animals had suffered at the hands of their masters. At least that's what was written on the monster encyclopedia. As I studied the monster from the area I was in, I also made sure to take note of anything important in the surroundings. Like if there were other monsters present, the rank of the monster, and what type of terrain the monster was resting on. Glancing at the beast from the corner of the wall, by the size of its body, it seemed to be around D rank at best. Kevin should be able to handle it, albeit with a little bit of difficulty. The reason why defeating the hodag was crucial was because once we defeated the hodag, the scenery around us should change. It might look like a cave at first, but once we kill the hodag, everything around us should change as we will be teleported towards a different area of the dungeon. The main area of the dungeon and where the Levisha style could be found. What's the plan? Touching my chin as I contemplated for a couple of seconds, I glanced at Kevin who was behind me. Moving back, I nudged him with my head and told him to look. Take a look. Nodding his head, peeking from the corner of the wall, Kevin's brows furrowed. Is that a hodag? Nodding my head, I crossed my arms and softly said. Yeah, and also the key to getting your 5-star sword art. Staring at me seriously, without asking any questions, Kevin nodded his head and asked. Okay, so what do you want me to do? Hearing Kevin's question, as if I was stating the most obvious thing, I slowly said. Kill it, of course. The Author's POV. Chapter 124, Hidden Dungeon, 4. Glancing at the hodag peacefully resting in the middle of the cave, looking back at me, in a low voice Kevin asked. So once we kill it we get to the main dungeon area? Nodding my head in affirmation, I responded. Yeah, after we kill the Real challenge begins. Alright, if it's only a hodag, it shouldn't be that hard. Hup. Nodding his head in understanding, Kevin summoned his sword. Thereafter, tensing his leg muscles, he directly shot towards the hodag. Hew up. Arriving before the hodag, without hesitation, Kevin swung his sword towards its tail. The most dangerous part of the monster. Clank. Queak. A loud metallic sound resounded across the dungeon, followed by a loud screeching sound. Soon after, like a whip, the hodag's tail shot towards Kevin who swiftly moved backward and dodged it. Unbothered by the commotion that was happening, standing not so far from where Kevin was, glancing at the book, I quickly gave Kevin instructions. Kevin, in a couple of seconds the hodag's tail will come at you once again, take one step back and aim towards its left flank, near its leg. That's its weak spot. Roger that. Nodding his head, Kevin gripped his sword more tightly. Swoosh. And just like I had stated, the hodag's tail came swinging towards Kevin. It was so fast that only a blur could be seen. The way the tail curved in the air as well as the sound that it produced as it moved, reminded me of a whip. Gotcha. Whop. Listening to what I had said, taking a step back, Kevin narrowly avoided the tail. Thereafter, without skipping a beat, Kevin shot like a bullet and aimed towards the left side of the hodge. Spurt. Like a knife cutting through butter, Kevin's sword inserted itself into the hodag's left leg area. Green blood spurted everywhere and a loud enraged roar shook the dungeon. Queak-eek. Swoosh. Wee, off you go. Creating a circle with my sword, a translucent ring appeared before me. With a flick of my fingers, I whistled at Kevin who nodded his head and jumped upwards. Thanks. Doing a backflip in the air, a couple of meters above the hodag, Kevin skillfully dodged the beast's tail that was trashing the ground below in a berserk state. Without hesitation, twisting his body in the air, Kevin's foot perfectly landed on my ring, and subsequently after, he propelled his body downwards with his sword aimed towards the skull of the hodag. Bomb. Like a meteor, Kevin shot towards the hodag. Watching Kevin perform this from below, I couldn't help but be impressed by his agility and flexibility. Without me needing to tell him what he had to do, he perfectly understood the intent behind me placing a ring in the air. Talking about the ring, after I trained with it a bit more, I found out that it could also be used as a place to step in the air. Though I haven't tried on it for myself, it worked multiple times with Kevin. I should definitely take note of this feature for the future. Queak-eek. Crashing around the dungeon, the hodag maniacally looked for anything to direct its anger towards. Soon after, spotting me in the distance, the hodeg's eyes turned scarlet red as it quickly headed in my direction. Glancing at the hodeg that was heading in my direction, unbothered by it, I leaned back and lazily yawned. I then proceeded to coat my body with mana. Hooam. Queek. Bomb. Just as the hodeg was about to reach me, like a meteor, Kevin crashed onto the top of the hodeg's head and green blood sprayed everywhere. TSSSSSSS. As the green blood splashed against the coat of mana covering my body, steam slowly raised in the air. Yeah, the hodeg's blood was very acidic. With his sword deeply imbued into the hodeg's body, Kevin slowly closed his eyes and exhaled. Ooh. Looking at the now dead hodeg below Kevin, I lightly applauded. Well done. Opening his eyes, Kevin looked at me and asked. What next? We just why? Rumble. Right on cue, just as I was about to tell Kevin what was going to happen next, the whole dungeon shook. Thereafter, as if we had entered a portal, both Kevin and I lost our senses, and the world around us turned dark. Voom. KHHH. Holding onto the side of my stomach, I grimaced in pain. Though it wasn't the first time I went through this, I was still not used to the sensation of being transported around. It felt as though my body was pulverized to then be reconstructed in a completely different place. Wasn't pleasant. Is this the middle area of the dungeon? Standing not so far from where I was, Kevin, who seemed to be completely unfazed, looked around the new environment we were in. Brushing my hair to the side, I too looked around the dungeon. Covering my eyes with my hand, a clear blue sky with a pale yellow sun met my sight. Tall towering trees stood next to us, and heavy vegetation filled with herbs and flowers appeared all over the place. It was an oddly beautiful sight. The new environment was a stark different compared to the other dungeons I had been in. It somehow looked normal. Still, just because it looked normal didn't mean I should let my guard down. We were, after all, in a pocket dimension that connected to the demon world. This place was filled with monsters. So where are we going? Frowning, I looked around me. After a bit of thinking, I pointed towards the east and urged Kevin to follow along. This way. Okay. Nodding his head, Kevin followed without hesitation. After what had happened previously in the dungeon, Kevin was more than convinced by my abilities. As long as it wasn't something that didn't seem unreasonable, he wasn't going to dispute my decisions anymore. Noticing his attitude, I smiled to myself. Good. Convincing him that I wasn't a scammer was one of the main goals I had set for myself when proposing this deal. Moreover, with him being less apprehensive towards me, I could use this to my advantage in the future to avoid unnecessary problems. Ren, stop. Snapping me out of my thoughts, Kevin placed his hand on my shoulder as he pointed forward. Don't get lost in your own thoughts, there are monsters over there. Looking at the direction of where Kevin was pointing at, not so far from where Kevin and I were, a group of light blue translucent flame-like things levitated near the ground. Frowning slightly, I couldn't help but tilt my head in confusion as I said. Aren't those just F-ranked will-o-wisps? If I didn't remember wrongly, wisps were probably some of the easiest monsters to get rid of inside F dungeons because of their inability to move fast. Moreover, they were only F rank. Even I could take care of them without batting an eye. Shaking his head, Kevin pointed towards the wisp-like creatures. This time, as he spoke, his voice contained a rare trace of solemnity. What do you mean just will-o-wisps? Look carefully at their color. If you pay close attention you can tell that those are not wisps but in fact, E-ranked night lizards. Wisps' flames are dark blue whilst the one over there is light blue. Therefore, we can easily deduce that they are in fact the E-ranked monsters night lizards, which are on a completely different level to wisps. Now that you're pointing this out they really do seem to be night lizards. Touching my chin and taking a better look at the wisp-like objects, I finally realized that Kevin was in fact right. E-ranked monster, night lizard. A monster that hunted in groups. Because of the blue flame around their body, they were often mistaken for wisps, and because of this fact, many heroes had died at their hands. With their incredible speed, they were almost impossible to kill unless someone else had the equivalent or an even faster speed to them. Moreover, as they hunted in groups, they terrified even C-ranked heroes who could barely keep up with their speeds. Kevin's apprehension towards them was understandable. Seeing that I understood, Kevin stared at the night lizards from the distance and started speaking to me. So we need to be careful when handling this, as their incredibly fast speeds can even, Just as Kevin was about to finish formulating his plan, a clicking sound resounded across the area he was in. Click. The second movement of the Keiki-style, horizon-splitting slash. Soon after, a bright light instantly dyed the surroundings in white. Thereupon, after the light died down, the clean dissected bodies of the lizard could be found sprawled all over the ground. Done, let's go. With my hand still on the sheet of my blade, I smiled at Kevin and moved forward. Standing there speechless for a while, Kevin couldn't help but alternate his head between the lizard's dissected bodies and me. When did he attack? The Author's POV. Chapter 125, Hidden Dungeon, 5. You. Staring at Ren's back for a couple of seconds, Kevin couldn't find any words to say. Though he had a bit of a hunch regarding Ren's strength, when he saw it in person, he was at a loss for words. Fast. So incredibly fast and efficient. Although his attention wasn't directed towards Ren at the time he attacked, in the blink of an eye, all of the night lizards were killed. Not one was spared. 11 night lizards were dissected in a blink of an eye. Something that would have taken him quite a while to accomplish. Recalling the lightning-fast attack that came from behind him, Kevin couldn't help but think to himself. Could I have stopped that? Closing his eyes, Kevin envisioned himself defending himself against that attack. In the end, after a couple of seconds, he shook his head. He didn't know. Perhaps when he was fully alert he could, but if he wasn't paying attention. Stopping his thoughts there, Kevin didn't want to think about it. Just the thought of him facing such lightning-fast attack made him shudder. Ooh. Taking a deep breath and looking at Ren walking up front, Kevin had so many questions in his mind, but he refrained from voicing them out. Everyone had their secret, and he knew this fact better than anyone else. After all, he was hiding a pretty big secret himself. Although he didn't know why Ren was trying to hide his strength, he knew better than anyone to just shut up and go move on. Come on, we still got a bit to cover. Glancing at Kevin, who was deep into his own thoughts, a faint smile appeared on my lips. Knowing Kevin, he was most likely comparing himself to me. It was a habit of his. Be it friend or foe, he would always compare his strength to others. It was just engraved into his system. The hot-blooded mindset of a youth seeking to compare himself to someone else and see who was better. That's what Kevin was experiencing. Shaking my head, I couldn't help but bitterly smile. I'm too old for that. Though I also wanted to get stronger, I didn't have the same hot-blooded mindest a youth had. Maybe at times, but usually I preferred to stay calm. Although when I first came into this world I was anything but calm, as I adjusted myself to this place, I somehow regained my confidence and became much calmer. Moreover, he was misunderstanding the true extent of my strength. Although the night lizards were indeed creatures that were hard to kill for him, they were a breeze for someone like me who could just kill them with my incredible speed. Either way, it doesn't really matter. I wanted to get over with this dungeon as fast as possible. After all, I had many things to do in preparation for the many tasks I had to complete by the end of the month. Thus, glancing at Kevin, I picked up my speed. Hurry up, we've still got half a day worth of distance to cover. Like that, for about the next 5 hours or so, Kevin and I swiftly moved around the dungeon and killed any monster that obstructed our paths. Of course, whenever we killed a less than D ranked monster, I would quickly skin it alive and try to see if it had a core. However, somehow, Lady Luck wasn't on my side today. Well, that was what I thought until... Kiwi-wee. A loud desperate cry resounded across the forest as Kevin appeared on top of a large bat-like monster. Glancing at the humongous bat that was lying dead on the ground, glancing at me, Kevin asked. This should be the last one, no? Yup, now move aside. Nodding my head, unsheathing my sword, I merrily walked towards the bat and stabbed towards its chest area. Spurt. Watching me skin the bat, Kevin shook his head. Out of the hundreds of monsters they had killed, not one had a core. If there was one thing he learned from Gilbert's class was that finding a core was just as hard as winning the lottery. The chances were almost slim to none. Just give up, the probability of getting a core is really small, so you better just be. Vroom. Vroom. Just as Kevin was telling me to give up, pulling a purple orb-like object that continuously pulsated a purple hue, I raised my brow towards Kevin as a smirk inadvertently appeared on my face. Sorry, I didn't quite get what you were trying to say. Staring at my smirking face, a vein bulged on Kevin's forehead. Trying his best to calm himself down, an awkward smile appeared on his face. congratulations. MHHHM. Nodding my head in satisfaction, I couldn't help but slowly caress the purple orb in my hand. Did my E+ rank luck finally work? Or was this due to Kevin's luck? Either way, placing the orb in my dimensional space, I merrily walked towards the forest. Let's go. Walking for a further 200 meters, Kevin couldn't help but ask. How much longer do we have to walk? I think we've pretty much crossed half of the dungeon already. Halting my steps in front of a large area filled with large thick green vines, squatting down and placing my hand on the floor, after a couple of seconds, looking up towards Kevin I slowly said. Actually, we are pretty much already here. Here. Looking around, Kevin couldn't help but be confused as all he saw were thick vines and trees everywhere. In fact, the vegetation was so thick here that he couldn't even see the sun. I don't see anything. Standing up, cracking my neck, I said. That's because you can't see it yet. Slash. Slash. Unsheathing my sword, I then proceeded to hack towards the large vines. Like that, for the next 5 minutes, I continuously cut down the large vines in front of me. Soon after, a large rumbling sound started becoming discernible by both me and Kevin as the ground below us shook slightly. Looking up ahead, and seeing a small light appear from the gaps of the vines, a smile appeared on my face. All right. Slash. Slashing one more time, the scenery before me and Kevin changed one more time as a large waterfall appeared before us. Rumble. Is that a waterfall? Yup. Simultaneously halting our footsteps, Kevin and I watched as an enormous waterfall appeared before us. Surrounded by vines, a pocket-like space that contained a large pond and a waterfall appeared before us. Looking up, we could finally once again see the sun shining down on the land. Splash. Splash. As the water fell and crashed against the hard rocks on the ground, a small rainbow appeared in the area. It was a truly mesmerizing sight. Snapping out of his daze, Kevin looked around and asked. What do we do now? Glancing at Kevin, taking off my shirt and pants, without hesitation, I jumped into the small pond below the waterfall. What else aside from swimming? Splash. Soon after I said those words, diving deep into the water, I felt my skin sting due to the cold sensation of the water brushing against my skin. Gritting my teeth and remaining underwater, I waited for Kevin to dive as well. Splash. Not a minute after, Kevin's figure appeared next to me beneath the water. Using my hand to signal him to follow me, using breaststroke, I swam towards the deeper end of the water. As I swam, appearing in my view was a small black tunnel. Glancing at Kevin behind me, and making sure he was following me, I pointed towards the tunnel and swam in it. Looking at the tunnel, Kevin nodded his head and proceeded to follow me. Splash. Splash. Inside of a dark cave, the tranquil pond that did not ripple for years, suddenly rippled as shortly after two large heads appeared from beneath the water. Hoo-ah. Hoo-ah. Appearing from beneath the water, I along with Kevin, heavily gulped for air as we floated in the water. Let's get out, it's a bit too cold. As my teeth chattered, using breaststroke, I moved towards the edge of the pond and quickly got out of the water. Getting out of the water, I couldn't help but shiver due to the cold. Although I was somehow more resistant to the cold, it still didn't prevent me from getting cold. Shortly after, taking out a towel from my dimensional space, I dried my body and put on my clothes. After making sure I had all my clothes on, turning towards Kevin, who was also dressed up, I nodded towards him and moved deeper into the cave. All right, follow me, we're close. Okay. Drying his hair with a towel, Kevin nodded his head and followed me into a dark path inside of the cave. As we were walking deeper into the cave, 5 minutes in, a strong residual magical energy could be felt in the air. The closer we walked, the more stifling the atmosphere became. Voom. Voom. Opening his eyes wide, feeling the intense magical energy, Kevin looked at me, to which I nodded back. Yes, we're here. Thereafter, turning right of the passageway, a large purple gate appeared before us. However, contrary to a regular gate, this one had evident signs of human tampering, as thick black pillars appeared on its sides along with some tall statues of what seemed to be gargoyles. Stopping before the large gate, I rubbed my hand together and said, "Welp, this is as far as I can go." Nodding his head slowly, without looking away from the gate, Kevin opened his mouth and quietly asked, "Is this where I can find the sword art?" Nodding my head, I made sure to remind him of a few things that I had previously told him on our way here. "Yeah, make sure you follow the instructions that I told you on the way to the dungeon, only look for a golden book at the center of the palace and don't go anywhere else as I can't control. Staring at the gate in a daze, most of my words went from one ear to the other. Noticing this, I sighed and just stopped talking. I'm going. Seeing that I was done talking, Kevin took a step towards the gate. Bye. Helplessly smiling, I waved at him. However, just as Kevin was about to enter, recalling something, Kevin turned around and looked at me straight into my eyes. Seriously nodding his head, he solemnly said, "Thank you, if I really get the sword art, I'll keep the end of my deal." Smiling without responding, I watched as Kevin subsequently entered the portal. Vroom. Wham. Watching Kevin's figure disappear into the portal, I lazily yawned and leaned against one of the statues next to the portal. This might take a bit. The Author's POV. Chapter 126, Hidden Dungeon, 6. Vwam. Kevin's entire body was enveloped in a golden luster. Soon after, Kevin appeared in a whole new place. KHH, where am I? Glancing around in confusion, Kevin once again found himself in the middle of a forest. However, this time, in front of him, stood a large majestic palace that towered in the middle of the forest. It reached all the way to the sky as green vines entangled themselves on the side of the walls. At the front of the palace were two giant golden doors that sealed the entrance of the palace. As Kevin looked at the palace from the distance, he was so shocked by the appearance of the palace that he thought he had actually gone back in time, back in the medieval times. The palace still felt as majestic and grand as it would have back when it was just built. This must be the place Ren told me about. Noticing the palace, Kevin remembered everything that Ren told him before entering. From what he would see upon entering the dungeon to what things he needed to avoid and what areas were strictly forbidden. Collecting himself, nodding his head, Kevin walked all the way until he reached the entrance of the palace. According to what Ren had told him, behind the golden doors of the place was where the 5-star sword art that he was looking for was located. Halting his steps for a split moment, the images of what happened between him and Gilbert replayed in Kevin's mind. As he recalled those images, Kevin couldn't help but clench his fists tightly. Never again. Never again did he want to be humiliated like that. Ooh. Arriving in front of the two golden doors, taking a deep breath and placing his hands on the door, Kevin proceeded to open the two enormous doors. Sheehan. As he opened the door, a dazzling glow nearly blinded him, making him unable to open his eyes. Covering his eyes to mitigate the impact of the light, with great difficulty, he forced his eyes open and saw vast sculptures sitting in the palace. Each sculpture was different from the others. There was a golden armored knight, an enormous dragon, and all other sorts of fantastical creatures. Under the feet of these giant sculptures was a path that led ahead where the statues of two angels holding onto two harps could be seen. Walking around in a daze, Kevin followed the path and reached a strange altar, where on top, all kinds of books and scrolls that were written with powerfully dense words appeared. Squinting his eyes to get a better look, as Kevin observed the books and scrolls, he could feel the powerful intent in each and every word written inside of those scrolls. Boundless. Those were the words that perfectly described how he felt as he looked towards the books and scroll. He could practically envision an old man sitting on a large spacious desk writing those scrolls with every last part of his remaining life. In the midst of admiring the scrolls and books, sensing something, Kevin noticed that at the very center of this altar was a golden book that shined a golden luster. It pulsated a dense and majestic golden light that almost made it feel as if was alive. Moreover, compared to the other books, this one seemed to be far more complex. Touching the book with his hand, Kevin's eyes soon became entranced by the two words engraved on it. Levisha style. Levisha style, Grandmaster Levisha. As if everything started to click, Kevin instantly realized what sword this was. Recalling the legends of Grandmaster Levisha, a smile inadvertently appeared on his face. Elegant, precise, and concise, this was the perfect sword art that he was looking for. Voam. KHHH. Just as Kevin was about to open the book, strange golden energy spread throughout the mysterious book as Kevin's hand became stuck on top of the book. It soon enveloped Kevin completely. Soon after, like a flood, strange images inserted themselves inside of Kevin's mind, causing his eyes to turn white. Kiwawa. Shortly after that, Kevin's pained scream resounded across the empty space. Thud. Darkness enveloped Kevin's vision, as his body dropped to the ground. Everything turned silent and the book lost its golden luster. Hoom. Yawning like there was no tomorrow, I checked my watch and stared at the dungeon behind me. 6 hours. That's how long Kevin was inside of the dungeon. If I wasn't wrong, currently, Kevin was going through Grandmaster Levish's trial. Though it was a tough trial, back in the novel, Kevin successfully managed to pass the trial without much difficulty. Moreover, only upon succeeding would he finally be able to get his hands on the sword art. I doubt he would give up halfway just because the trial was hard. Though he was weaker as compared to the time he actually got the sword art, I wasn't worried. More so than him being the protagonist, I had faith that he could succeed. After all, Kevin's strength 2 months from now shouldn't be that much different. I was sure of this as for the next few months, there were no major events circling him after all. This part of the novel was supposed to be a time skip that directly skipped all the way towards the intra-academy exchange. By the time the arc started, he was still ranked D-, halfway towards D rank. Knock. Knock. Standing up and walking around the place, recalling something, I knocked on one of the gargoyle statues next to the portal. As I did, I couldn't help but admire the amount of fine detail that was put into them. From the way they were carved and shaped, they almost seemed to be lifelike. Moreover, what made them especially unique were the 2 ruby red eyes that were deeply imbued in the areas where their eyes were supposed to be. It made them look more alive. Sheehan. Still, without caring too much, putting my hands on top of the heads of the 2 gargoyle statues in front of the portal, channeling my mana into them, they soon shrank and disappeared from where they were, leaving behind nothing but the portal. Clapping my hands together in satisfaction, I gratefully looked towards the portal and thanked Kevin. "We'll be taking this, thank you very much, Kevin." Sheehan. Extending my hand forward, a miniature version of the gargoyle statue appeared in my hand. It looked exactly like the sculpture from before. However, it was much smaller compared to before. Taking a good look at it, I couldn't help but nod in satisfaction. TSSSS. Biting the tip of my finger, I placed my finger on top of the statue and let the blood dripping from my finger drip on the statue. Sheehan. Thereafter, as my blood touched the statue, the gargoyle statue's ruby red eyes shone brightly as white steam rose from its body. As white steam released in the air, suddenly, a blinding light covered the whole area around me. Unbothered by the blinding light, my eyes remained fixated on the statue as a blue text appeared on top of the statue. Twin gargoyle statue, E rank. There we go. An artifact that was originally supposed to belong to Kevin back in the novel. However, although the statues were indeed taken by Kevin, he actually never used them as I practically forgot about them. MHHH, actually more than me forgetting about them, it's more like they were useless to Kevin. After all, they didn't have any outstanding effect apart from the fact that upon setting them on the ground, they could target a specific person and stun them for a split second. Sounded pretty strong there, but there was a critical flaw that made me, as an author back then, unable to properly use them and hence discard them. Problem was that setting them up and activating them from the distance required a lot of effort. It required the enemy to stand in a specific area where the gargoyle's eyes looked towards and had to be set up in advance. This required you to either predict where the enemy was going to stand, or lure them there. Both were extremely hard things to accomplish. Moreover, for someone like Kevin who liked to fight face to face, such an artifact really didn't suit him. Wasn't really sure as to why I even created them in the first place. I guess back then I just really loved overgearing him with artifacts and useless stuff. If I had to say, even for me, the statues weren't really that useful. Considering that I had to set them up beforehand, I doubt I had a good use for them. However, it could still serve as a nice souvenir for my mercenary group office. Moreover, just in case someone comes in, I could activate them and deal with the intruders. Though it was only a split second, for most people it wouldn't mean much, but for me who practiced the keiki style, that split second could turn out to be devastating. Putting the statue away and noticing a slight fluctuation in magical energy in the air, I turned around and glanced at the portal behind me. The portal was currently fluctuating wildly as the magical energy in the surroundings intensified by the second. Voom. Soon after, the portal shone brightly as a dark silhouette weakly walked out of the portal. Recognizing the silhouette as Kevin, I stood up. Walking towards him, I couldn't help but ask. "Did you get it?" Stopping right in front of the gate, glancing at me, after a couple of seconds, Kevin smiled. "Yup, KHH." However, shortly after Kevin exited the portal, stumbling a couple of steps, face first, he fell towards the ground. "Hew up." Grabbing onto Kevin's weak and haggard figure, I looked at his tired figure. Shaking my head, I patted him on the back and slowly said, You did good. Smiling slightly, before passing out, Kevin softly mumbled. Thanks. The Author's POV. Chapter 127, New Piece, 1. Inside of a white space was a tall man with a long gray beard. His shoulder-length white hair gently cascaded over his broad shoulders. His towering back proudly stood like an immovable mountain, and his muscles, which despite his age, seemed to show no sign of aging as hidden within them was a boundless power. Standing shirtless with only a set of long worn-out brown pants, in the white void, a broadsword appeared in the man's hands. Gripping onto the broadsword with his two hands, the old man's muscles bulged. His green veins continuously wiggled as his back expanded, casting a large shadow over the area in front of him. Ooh. Exhaling, turbid air escaped from the old man's mouth as his grip on the sword intensified. Slash. Thereafter, the sound of his hand slowly slashing through the air resounded across the space. His every movement left a faint trace whenever his hand moved. It almost felt as if another illusion of him was mimicking his movements at a slower pace. Slash. Slash. After the first slash came the second, then the third, then the fourth, and then after a while, came the 64th movement. TSSSSSSSS. Raising his sword in the air, behind his back, the old man held onto the sword with both hands as his grip intensified. The veins on his hands and muscles became even more prominent as steam slowly rose from the man's body. Shortly after, the man's body started shrinking as his hair became whiter, and his skin became even more wrinkly. A couple of seconds after, the muscles of the old man's body shrunk completely, leaving behind an old husk of a man that was a far cry from what he was before. TSSSSSSSS. Facing the changes happening to his body, the old man's face remained stoic. Retaining the grip of the broadsword in the air, the old man's weak yet steady figure fiercely stared at what was before him. His gaze, which was full of determination and insanity, stared at the void before him. Jaya. Screaming at the top of his lungs, the old man slashed. Kacha. As soon as the old man slashed, everything froze. Shortly after, the white space disappeared and the world started to crumble. Gua. Opening his eyes wide, Kevin sat up straight as he screamed. My God, can you not scream like that? Covering my ears with my hand, I couldn't help glare at Kevin, who seemed to have just woken up from a long nightmare. Huh. Hearing my voice, blinking a couple of times, Kevin massaged his forehead. After making sure that everything was within his mind, Kevin glanced at me, asked, How long was I out? Taking a look at my watch, I responded. About 2 hours. If we include the 6 hours you were in the dungeon, I've pretty much spent 8 hours in this place. As I spoke, the annoyance within my voice couldn't be hidden. I mean, I literally waited for almost 8 hours. If not for the gargoyle statues keeping me entertained, I would have long been bored to death. In fact, at one point I did want to wake Kevin up, but no matter what I tried to do to wake Kevin up, his body refused to budge. Be it kick, slap, or scream, nothing worked. Having exhausted all means, I eventually just gave up and sat down in defeat. Sitting up straight, Kevin asked, Where are we? Seeing that Kevin was still disoriented from what he went through, I pointed towards the purple portal and said, We are still at the entrance of the portal. Entrance. Looking around, Kevin soon noticed that he was indeed back inside of the cave that led to the portal. Glancing at the purple portal that shone brightly, a complicated look appeared on Kevin's face. As he recalled the old man in his dreams, he couldn't help ask to himself, was that the true Levisha style? After going through numerous trails, Kevin passed out and found himself inside of a strange white world where an old man stood. Shortly after he appeared in the world, Kevin witnessed the old man perform every stance of the Levisha style, including the last stance, the 6th, 4th stance, and last stance of the Levisha style. I am boundless. Recalling the 64th strike performed by Grandmaster Levisha as he used all of his life energy in order to perform it, Kevin couldn't help but shudder as he thought to himself, Can I do it? Closing his eyes, Kevin imagined himself performing the 64 stances. Closing his eyes, he tried recalling the sensation that Grandmaster Levisha felt as he performed the last stance. From his muscle movement, breathing pattern, his demeanor, Kevin tried to recall everything that he saw within his dream. Now that his mind was lucid, he tried his best to engrave every minute detail into his brain. Shortly after, Kevin envisioned himself performing the 64 stances. However, right after the 8th stance, Kevin's brows knit tightly. As he continuously practiced the Levisha style in his mind, the only thing Kevin could envision was his body exploding into millions of pieces as soon as he finished the 8 stance. The 8 stance, that was his current level. Frowning hard, Kevin shook his head. He still had a long way to go before being able to come close to performing the 64th stance. Moreover, unlike Grandmaster Levisha who had to sacrifice his life in order to perform such art, Kevin wanted to do it without sacrificing his life force. He wanted to perfect it. "Oi, answer me." Snapping Kevin out of his thoughts was my annoyed voice. Calling out for Kevin who was deep into his own world, I shook my head and said, "I don't know about you, but if I'm late for class, I might get myself in an annoying situation, so hurry up and get ready. We have 1 day to get back to the academy." "Oh, sorry. Let's go." Nodding his head, Kevin was reminded of the fact that the lectures indeed resumed tomorrow. Thus, without complaining, Kevin stood up and patted his body. After making sure I didn't forget anything, looking at Kevin, I nudged my head and walked towards the tunnel that led to the pond. "Let's hurry up, or we might miss the train." "Coming." Nodding his head, Kevin followed me towards the path. However, just as he was about to leave, Kevin recalled something. Halting his steps and turning around, he bowed towards the portal and softly said, "Thank you, I will make sure to carry out your legacy spectacularly." Thereafter, he left and entered the dark tunnel. Silence and tranquility once again returned in the surroundings. Gotcha. However, a couple of hours after Kevin left, the purple hue around the portal started fluctuating madly as the portal everything started to tremble. Rumble. The cave shook and everything started to slowly crumble as large rocks fell down onto the ground. After almost half a day of walking, Kevin and I were finally in the clear as we exited the dungeon. This time, because I wanted to get out as fast as possible, using the book, I avoided all possible dangers and chose the fastest possible route to the exit. Moreover, as I knew the way back due to me remembering how we got here, I was able to save time as I didn't need to constantly look at the map. Thus, not long after we left the dungeon, we were already back in the town of Roa. Roa was a small town that inhabited 50,000 people and was built on the Clayton Ridge. The town was fairly beautiful as greenery could be found everywhere. Moreover, the fresh air and beautiful architectural structures of the town made this place look extremely lovely. The whitewashed houses that filled the town were especially beautiful, but that wasn't what truly made this town stand out. No, it was that the structures were built directly into the rocky cliffs surrounding the Clayton Ridge area. This resulted in a beautiful natural rock formation hanging over the streets, providing shade and stunning views of the mountains and scenery below. Admiring the scenery and walking along the cobblestone streets of Roa, Kevin glanced at me and asked, "What time is the train?" Checking my watch, I calmly responded, "In about an hour." Nodding his head, and placing his hand on his chin as he fell into deep contemplation, Kevin thought for a moment before suggesting, "Should we just wait at the train station then?" Similarly placing my hand on my chin, I nodded my head. Let's do that then." Though we could have gone to eat at a restaurant nearby, because the train was in an hour, it was better to just directly go to the train station. Didn't want to lose the train ride because the food took too long to arrive. Plus, I wasn't even that hungry, to begin with. As we were walking, glancing towards my surroundings, I couldn't help but notice that there were fewer and fewer people on the streets. Soon, a couple of minutes after I noticed this fact, no one was within our sights. Everything was deserted. Almost as if every person from the face of this world disappeared. Frowning deeply, I couldn't help but say, "Why is everything so quiet around here?" Glancing around, Kevin too noticed the changes as a deep frown also appeared on his face. "Now that you mention it, it is indeed quite, huh?" Not even halfway through his sentence, the world around Kevin and I distorted. Boom. Thereafter, a large invisible dome appeared covering the area where Kevin and I were. Seeing the dome, Kevin couldn't help but shout as he quickly summoned his sword and took a stance. A dimensional space, crap, it's an ambush. Opening my eyes wide, I couldn't help but freeze for a split second. Shortly after, looking at Kevin next to me who was ready in a battle position, I couldn't help but think to myself, why is this happening? This scene never appeared in the novel. The Author's POV. Chapter 128, New Piece, 2. Shit, what's going on? Recovering from my daze, I quickly drew my sword and calmly looked towards my surroundings. I needed to remain calm. I couldn't let my emotions get the best of me like in the past. Who? Exhaling, I tried to analyze what was going on. Currently, Kevin and I were trapped inside of a dimensional space with no idea about who was targeting us. Moreover, this wasn't something that was supposed to happen in the novel. Once again, reality and the plot were distorted. What was even more unsettling was the fact that this happened despite the fact that no one knew that Kevin and I were going to the Clayton Ridge. Someone must have tailed us. But who? The first name that came up in my mind was of course Gilbert, someone with who Kevin just recently got into conflict, but I quickly discarded such a notion. Gilbert was currently under strict watch from certain professors. Therefore, any move he made was extremely risky. If someone found Kevin dead, the first person people would look towards would be Gilbert, and he knew that. Hence why it couldn't be him. If it wasn't him, then who? Michael Parker. GHHH. The more I thought about it, the more I couldn't help but be confused as the frown on my face deepened. Just what in the world is going on? Vwam. Glaring towards one of the houses in the distance, Kevin pointed his sword in that direction as a red hue enveloped the body of his sword. Thereafter, he shouted. Get out, I know you're hiding there. Kakik, guess you found us out. Chuckling, a black humanoid creature with 2 horns on his head and bat-like wings showed up from behind one of the houses. Demon. Noticing the identity of the creature that came out, Kevin's whole demeanor changed. His body shook as veins appeared all over his face. The red hue around him intensified uncontrollably. I'll kill you all. Oi, calm down. Noticing Kevin's unstable mind, I quickly headed in his direction in hopes of calming him down. Kevin's state wasn't good. His hatred towards demons was on another level, as his mind right now was clouded with nothing but rage. If he didn't get a hold of himself now, things could get quite messy. However, just as I thought Kevin was about to explode, stopping me with his hand, Kevin took a deep breath and said, "Foo, I'm okay." Shortly after he said that the red hue around his body stabilized. Are you sure? Nodding his head, Kevin's demeanor turned incomparably serious as he looked at the demon in the air. Yeah, moreover we have a bigger problem to deal with. Fwa, fwa, fwa. As soon as Kevin finished speaking as if on cue, appearing from nowhere, multiple black humanoid-like creatures with bat wings and horns on their head appeared in the surroundings. A twisted malicious smile appeared on each of their faces as they looked down on the both of us like a ripe fruit ready for the taking. Who sent you? Standing his ground, unfazed by the demons that had just shown up, Kevin's cold and emotionless voice resounded across the area. Who sent us? Glancing at each other, the demons in the air merely laughed at Kevin in ridicule. Kakik, why must we tell you? You're merely our prey, what right do you have to ask who we are? Just stand there quietly and let us feast on you. Nodding his head, Kevin looked at the demons in the air. There were about 15 of them, moreover, from what Kevin could tell from judging the fluctuations they released, most of them seemed to be EE ranked. Hoo, very well. Exhaling deeply, Kevin's grip on the sword strengthened as the red hue around his body shot up like a comet falling in the sky. Thereafter, he fully released his D-ranked pressure. Voam. I don't know why you're targeting me, but you'll regret coming after me. Especially not after what I've just been through. Feeling Kevin's pressure, the demons didn't even flinch. Chuckling, the foremost demon, the first to have shown up, and the one that seemed to be the leader of the group, slowly caressed his chin as he observed Kevin from above. Kakik, Kevin Voss, you're quite popular among us demons, but unfortunately for you, you're not our main target. Frowning, Kevin was taken aback. Thereafter, he turned his head in my direction. Me. Opening my eyes wide, I couldn't help but point at myself. Smiling widely, all of the demons turned their attention towards me. Kakik, you must be Rindover. Stepping forward, the leader of the demons directly called my name, and as if a thunderclap had descended, my mind instantly entered a state of turmoil. What? What's happening? How did he know who I was? Were they really after me? A million questions emerged in my mind as I couldn't help but look at the demons above me in shock. I don't ever recall provoking demons B, no way. Stopping my thoughts there, my mind raced as multiple scenarios replayed in my mind. The further I thought about it, the more I realized my arrogance and complacency. I in fact did interact with demons before. Not once, but twice. Once with Baron of Everblood back in the dungeon, and one more time with the matriarch, when I killed Elijah, though indirectly. Thinking thus far, everything started to click. If it was indeed like I thought it was, then it was either the matriarch or Everblood who was targeting me. Now the real question was, who of the two was targeting me? Licking his lips, the foremost demon, the one that seemed to be the leader of the pack, cruelly smiled as he turned his attention towards Kevin. Well, although we were originally targeting the kid called Ren, now that we have seen you, Kevin Voss, you may as well stay and play with us now. Or are you perhaps interested in making a contract with us? If you say the word, we can make one here and right now. Ignoring the leader of the demons, Kevin turned around and looked at me. Holding tightly onto his sword, he said, Ren, I attack from the front, you cover me from behind. Taken aback for a moment, I proceed to nod my head. All right. Fwop. How dare you ignore me? Noticing the fact that Kevin had ignored him, the leader of the demons flapped his wings. Thereafter, like a bullet, his body shot towards us. Attack. Fwop. 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 One after another, more and more demons shot down towards where Kevin and I were. Watch out. Watching the demons dive towards us, moving backward, I proceeded to draw multiple circles in the air. Vroom. 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 Shortly after I drew the fifth circle in the air, revolving around me, 5 circles quickly encircled the area I was in. Ready. Boom. Shooting upwards, Kevin's body flew in the air as he met the demons midair. Hew up. Appearing before one of the demons, Kevin quickly attacked. Spurt. Slashing his sword forward, as if he was cutting through butter, one of the demons in front of Kevin split in half. What? Opening their eyes wide, all of the demons around Kevin looked at him in shock. Ignoring their shock, Kevin looked towards me as he shouted. Ren. On it. Swoosh. Moving 2 rings upwards, Kevin quickly stepped on one of them and proceeded to acrobatically move in the air. With every step he took, his blade would reap through a demon. Spurt. Spurt. Staring at the rings beneath Kevin's feet, one of the demons couldn't help but turn their attention towards me. Thereafter, extending his sharp claws towards me, the demon flapped his wings as his body shot toward me like a bullet. I'll kill you. Matching Kevin's tempo as I moved the rings beneath his feet, I soon noticed a demon quickly heading in my direction. Shaking my head, I proceeded to ignore him and kept moving the circles beneath Kevin's feet. You'll pay the price for ignoring me, human. In a matter of seconds, the demon appeared right before me. As his sharp nails neared my face, the demon couldn't help but smile maniacally as he shouted. Die. Click. However, right before his nails were about to dig into my neck, a clicking sound resounded the area I was in and the demon froze in midair. Opening his eyes wide open, the demon looked at me in horror. He could no longer feel his body. Trembling, he pointed at me as he weakly said, Impossible. Weren't you supposed to be F-ranked? Thud. As soon as he finished those words, he dropped dead on the ground. A small hole appeared on the top of his forehead. Glancing at the demon beneath my feet for a brief moment, I proceeded to turn my attention back towards Kevin as I softly said, Sorry, but you're a week late. What? What happened? Looking at the scene below them in a daze, some of the demons in the air couldn't help but freeze for a split second. Wasn't he supposed to be weak according to the reports? According to the reports they received, the student named Rendover was supposed to be F-rank at best, yet, staring at the dead horror-stricken demon beneath his feet, the demons in the air couldn't help but lightly shudder. The demons knew that information was flawed. Are you forgetting about me? Spurt. Without looking back, a faint smile appeared on Kevin's lips as another demon died by his blade. Although he didn't see what had happened, he didn't need to see what had happened. He already knew what the end result was going to be. If even he didn't know how to deal with that attack, what could some measly lower-ranked demons do? Let me. Noticing that the situation was becoming unfavorable, the leader of the demons took a step forward, and immediately an enormous pressure started emanating from his body. Voum. It was almost on equal terms to Kevin's. Die. Extending his hand towards Kevin, his long sharp nails stabbed in his direction. Clank. Khhhh. Blocking the attack with his sword, Kevin couldn't help but almost lose his footing. Fortunately, I pushed another ring forward, beneath the unstable foot, and helped Kevin regain his footing. Thanks. Briefly glancing at me, Kevin nodded his head. What are you waiting for? I'll take on Kevin, you attack him. Noticing the ring, glaring at the other demons before him, the leader of the demons pointed towards me as he shouted. Quickly kill him. Don't just stand there, do something. Thwop. Thwop. Thereafter, heeding his command, all of the demons apart from the leader dove down in my direction. Seeing the numerous demons heading in my direction, a deep frown emerged on my face. There were about 7 of them, however. As I looked at them, something didn't add up. From the way the demons were behaving, something felt off. Despite their comrades dying by our hands, they seemed way too calm. It was as though they weren't even scared of us to begin with. Almost as if they weren't worried about losing against Kevin and I. As my thought paused there, I quickly glanced towards my surroundings in hopes of finding anything that could help me. Yet, to my disappointment, I found nothing. Just what were they planning? Ooh. Exhaling, I closed my eyes. Too many factors that were well outside within my scope of reason just appeared. Although I was somehow remaining calm, it was not enough. I needed to be calmer. More ruthless. More decisive. More indifferent. Slowly the color within the world disappeared as everything around me rebuilt itself in this 3-dimensional space. All sorts of distracting thoughts escaped from my mind as the world around me turned black and white. The emotions on my face disappeared, and everything around me turned into chess pieces. Quietly looking up at the demons above me, I softly mumbled. Monarch's Indifference. The Author's POV. Chapter 129, New Piece, 3. Opening his eyes, Ren calmly stared at the demons coming at him from all directions. As he saw them coming his way, he felt nothing. No fear, no excitement, no anger, absolutely nothing. With an indifferent expression, Ren slightly moved his neck sideways as the hand of a demon brushed past his cheek. Shua. Thereafter, aiming towards the solar plexus, Ren turned his body 45 degrees as he elbowed the demon. Bam. As soon as Ren's elbow connected with the demon, a shockwave swept the surroundings as the other demons that were similarly headed in Ren's direction halted for a split second. Kaha. Falling to the ground, the demon hit by the elbow spit out blood as he held onto his chest area. He was in complete agony. Staring at the demon beneath his feet, Ren slowly said. Let me end the pain for you. Click. Thud. Without looking at the demon, Ren placed his hand onto the grip of his sword. Shortly after, a subtle clicking sound resounded across the area as the demon's head flew in the air. All of this happened in a matter of seconds. Shah. Shah. A split second after Ren decapitated the demon, moving backward, Ren narrowingly avoided the hands of 2 demons as a strand of his hair flew in the air. Dash. Tensing his calves, Ren quickly shot backward and distanced himself from the other demons. As he moved back, a green hue enveloped the bottom of his feet as his movement increased with every step. Get him. Die, you vermin. Staring at the 6 demons that were quickly approaching him, Ren's face remained calm and indifferent. Rather than focusing on their attacks, his attention was drawn towards their face. And he soon noticed one thing. How completely unfazed they were by the fact that their fellow comrades died before them. There was no shred of fear or hesitation in their eyes. Almost as if they didn't care about dying. Noticing this, Ren glanced in Kevin's direction. He was currently back on the ground fighting against the demon leader. Currently, both Kevin and the demon were in a stalemate. However, upon closer look, Ren could see that Kevin held a bit of an advantage. Despite the fact that neither of them budged from where they stood, Ren could tell by looking at the fine detail of their fight that Kevin was holding back whilst the demon leader was going all out. Moreover, he was also starting to show signs of exhaustion. Thus without hesitation, as Ren moved backward, unsheathing his sword, Ren drew 2 circles in the air. Swoosh. Thereafter, whilst still keeping an eye on the demons diving in his direction, quickly pointing towards Kevin, one of the circles flew in his direction. Right after doing that, stomping his foot on the ground, Ren forcefully changed direction as his body shot towards where Kevin was. His speed didn't decrease. No, rather, it increased. No, you don't. Noticing that he could no longer catch up with Ren, who was speeding up by the second, a white glow enveloped one of the demon's hands. Glaring at Ren, he quickly slashed in his direction. Thuum. Subsequently, as the demon slashed, a blue translucent image of a claw quickly headed in Ren's direction. Swoosh. Briefly glancing at the translucent claw headed in his direction, without hesitation, Ren pointed towards them as his other ring directly moved forward and blocked the demon's attack. Bam! Crash! As the claw clashed against the ring, for a couple of seconds neither refused to budge. However, shortly after, the glow around the ring diminished. Not even a couple of seconds after, the ring broke into millions of pieces as the translucent claw image moved forward. However, that was enough. Ren didn't need the ring to completely block the demon's attack. All he wanted was to delay the attack. Enough for him to reach Kevin. With his ever-increasing speed, Ren left after images of himself. As he moved, slowly, a white glow started emanating from his body. With each passing second, the white glow around his body intensified. Hoo! A couple of meters away from the demon leader and Kevin, Ren exhaled as turbid air escaped from his mouth. Thereafter, arriving before the demon leader, at a speed that both Kevin and the demon couldn't react, pulling out his sword from the sheath of his scabbard, a white glow enveloped the surroundings. Click. The first movement of the Keiki-style, quick flash. Clank. Clank. Fighting against the demon leader, Kevin skillfully and deftly dodged the sharp and pointy nails of the demon. With his sword, Kevin would counterattack shortly after the demon attacked. Like this, for the next few minutes, Kevin and the demon leader found themselves in a stalemate. One would attack and one would defend. This pattern continuously alternated between the two, however this did not last for long. Just as the demon leader was about to once again attack Kevin, appearing from out of nowhere, a translucent yellow ring appeared right when the demon was about to attack. Right at the moment the demon leader was about to lift his hand, and thus completely disrupting his momentum. Swoosh. Clank. Though the ring broke as quickly as it came, it still slowed down the attack by a split second. But that was enough for Kevin. Taking advantage of the opening that was given to him thanks to Ren's ring, Kevin strengthened the grip of his sword and a red hue enveloped his body. Thereafter, Kevin slashed at full force. Hue up. Slash. Clank. KHHH. Taking a step back, to the demon leader's surprise, he now found himself on the losing end. Noticing this, glancing away, he couldn't help but curse as he looked towards the 6 demons in the distance. What are you doing? Kill him. Enraged by the disruption, he couldn't help but shout at them. Turning your head away from me mid-fight. Foolish. Appearing before the demon leader, Kevin hacked towards his body. Clank. Clank. Thus, for the next minute or so, Kevin and the demon leader fought, with Kevin holding the advantage this time. With each passing second, Kevin's sword became heavier and faster. The demon leader was starting to struggle. Beads of sweat started dripping from the side of his face, as movements started becoming sloppier by the second. Clank. On multiple occasions the demon leader tried to distance himself from Kevin, however, as if he was an octopus, Kevin continuously stuck onto him, leaving him no space to breathe. Hup. Once again, Kevin slashed. Kaha, ah. As Kevin's sword connected with the demon's sharp nails, to the demon leader's horror, one of his nails cracked. Noticing this, Kevin once again increased the speed of his attacks. Slash. Slash. Clank. Clank. Like this, Kevin's advantage became even more apparent. As Kevin attacked, he couldn't help but notice one thing. Even though Kevin knew that he was currently suppressing the demon leader, he couldn't see this fight ending any time sooner. If things went on like this, Kevin felt that the fight would end in at least 20 more minutes. That was far too long for him. During those 20 minutes, many things could happen. Although he had faith in Ren killing all those demons, from his experience, Kevin felt that he needed to end this quickly. Thinking thus far, Kevin fell into deep thought as he couldn't help but think to himself. Should I end this with overdrive? If he used overdrive he could end this fight in an instant, but there was a major flaw with that skill. Right after he activated that skill, depending on how long he used it for, Kevin would find himself unable to move for the next 5 minutes. If he couldn't kill the demon leader during the time his overdrive was on, Kevin would be doomed. This was a really risky decision. Should I or should I not? Staring at the demon leader who was struggling under his barrage of attacks, Kevin grit his teeth and decided to go all in. He couldn't afford to fight for that long. The faster he killed his enemy, the better. Moreover, he was confident he could win this. Over. However, midway through activating overdrive, Kevin suddenly felt a gush of wind brush past his skin as subsequently after, the world around him turned white. Click. As Kevin's vision was impaired due to the world turning white, his ears managed to pick up a subtle metallic clicking sound. Spurt. Huh. Thereafter, a second after Kevin heard the clicking sound, Kevin felt his sword stab something. The tip of his sword soon became heavier. Not long after he felt that sensation, the world around him regained its normal color, and what Kevin saw made him freeze on the spot. The demon leader's body impaled on his sword. However, that was not the reason he was shocked. No. Staring at the lifeless corpse of the demon leader impaled on his sword, Kevin's sight was directed towards the top of his forehead, where a small yet deep hole appeared. What? Turning his head to the right, he once again froze on the spot. 10 meters away from him, with his back turned on him and his hand on the grip of his sword, Ren's figure appeared. Who? Exhaling turbid air from his mouth, Ren slowly turned his head and indifferently glanced at Kevin. Take care of the other demons. What? Snapping out of his daze, turning his head around, Kevin soon spotted 6 demons frantically rushing in his direction. Thud. Quickly removing his sword from the demon leader's body, Kevin took a stance as a loud thud resounded beneath his feet. Staring at Ren's indifferent figure, Kevin couldn't help but recall the time back in Hallberg. Those eyes. Those were the same eyes that he had back when he held Jean by the throat. The eyes of total indifference and disregard. Staring at Ren, Kevin couldn't help but think. Was this the real him? However, snapping himself out of his thoughts, Kevin looked at Ren and shouted. Ren, tell me what's going on, and what in the world happened? Ignoring Kevin, taking out a red book, Ren opened the book and slowly read the contents. Flip. Flip. As he read the book, his eyes moved left and right as he quickly flipped through the pages. As he read, no emotion appeared on his face. However, pausing on a certain page, a slight frown appeared on Ren's face. Plaque. Closing down the book, emotionlessly looking at Kevin, who was about to engage against the 6 demons, Ren opened his mouth and said, Stay here and deal with the rest, I have something to do. Quickly turning his head towards Ren, Kevin couldn't help but look at him as he shouted. What? Something to do? What khhh? Stopping mid-sentence, Kevin found the demons assaulting him from all sides. Seeing this, Ren slowly walked away. Hey, tell me. I'll be back shortly. The Author's POV. Chapter 130, New Piece, 4. Spurt. Huff, huff, huff. Breathing heavily, with his sword imbued on one of the demons that was stacked on top of 5 other demons, Kevin glanced at his surroundings. Craters and deep marks appeared on the cobblestone streets of Roa. Everything was destroyed. Though the demons Kevin was fighting were a lot weaker compared to the demon leader, because they were many, he had no choice but to move around a lot. Because he didn't have any skill that allowed him to fight multiple opponents at once, Kevin had no other choice but to kill them one at a time. Hence why he was currently tired. Wiping the sweat that had accumulated on his forehead, Kevin looked up and searched for Ren's figure. After directly leaving him behind to fend off against the remaining demons, Ren just disappeared from his view. He had no idea why. Frowning as he looked for him in the distance, Kevin couldn't help but mumble out loud. Just where did he GHM? However, just as he was about to directly look for him, snapping his head to the right, Kevin sensed something in the distance. In the opposite direction of where Ren left. Squinting his eyes, Kevin managed to spot something approaching his location from the distance. At a closer inspection, it was a grown woman in red. The woman's body was slender and fair, and her gaze was calm and stoic. Slowly, she made her way towards Kevin. When Kevin's gaze met her own, an indescribable feeling of numbness spread across his scalp. Thereafter he soon noticed 2 horns protruding from the top of her head, causing Kevin's heart to sink. Demon. Although the former did not give off a terrifying aura, a pressuring feeling had emerged across the surroundings, causing the entire streets of Roa to become deathly silent. This time Kevin knew he was in trouble. Tap. Tap. Slowly, stopping a fair bit of distance from Kevin, the woman looked towards her surroundings. Her indifferent face briefly glanced at the demons on the floor. However, it was only for a brief moment, as they soon paused on a particular demon in the distance. Looking at a particular demon with a small hole on his forehead, the woman softly said with a trace of pity in her voice. So he died too. Thereafter, frowning slightly, the matriarch looked towards Kevin. Staring at him for what felt an eternity, the matriarch slowly spoke. You must be Kevin Voss. Increasing the grip of his sword, Kevin didn't respond. Right now his mind was racing as he thought of solutions to get out of this situation. The person before him was on another level compared to the demon leader he had just fought. He even felt that even if he used overdrive, he wouldn't be able to win. Things were serious. Ooh. Kevin's heart palpitated as he couldn't help but take a deep breath to try to calm himself down. I see, you're a mute. How unfortunate. Deeply staring at Kevin, who refused to speak, the matriarch looked around and asked. Where is he? Frowning, Kevin slowly said. Who? Raising her brow and glancing at Kevin, the matriarch lightly smiled as she said. The boy named Ren. Hearing Ren's name being mentioned, Kevin couldn't help but frown. Him again. It seems like everything that had happened today was somehow related to Ren. Just what did he do to earn the ire of the demons? After this was over, Kevin was definitely going to get answers from him. Staring at the matriarch before him, Kevin slowly asked as he tried to buy time. What do you want from him? Still looking around for any sign of Ren, the matriarch slowly said. I'm here to finish business. Smiling, Kevin helplessly said. Sorry, I can't help you there. You see, I'm also looking for him. Soon after Kevin finished speaking, a tense and stifling atmosphere enveloped the area where Kevin and the matriarch were. I see. Fwam. Nodding her head, the matriarch's figure disappeared and reappeared right before Kevin. Then die. Bang. Thereafter, opening the palm of her hand, she gently moved her palm in his direction. With barely enough time for Kevin to react, crossing his arms, Kevin felt a gentle yet overbearing force pushing his body away. Kaha. Taking 10 steps back, Kevin felt his arms become numb as the air was knocked out of his lungs. Taking a couple of seconds to recover, staring at the matriarch in shock, the frown on his face deepened. Not bad. Staring at Kevin, and noticing that he was still alright after her attack, Angelica started to understand why a lot of the higher-ups were paying close attention to him. He was definitely a talent to drool over. However, right now she didn't care about that. She only had one goal at the moment, kill the one that ruined her life. Again. Once again, the matriarch's figure disappeared as she once again attacked Kevin. As she attacked, although she was considerably weakened by the series of events that had happened to her, with a bit of effort, Angelica was able to overwhelm Kevin. Bang. Bang. In the span of a couple of minutes, Kevin was pushed back more than 50 meters as the matriarch kept attacking him. Kevin barely had any breathing space as her attacks were fast and relentless. Damn it. Cursing out loud, Kevin tried his best to get out of the situation. However, no matter what he tried, she would reappear right before him and attack him once again. Moreover, Kevin felt that the reason why she was able to overwhelm him was mostly due to the fact that he was tired. If he wasn't tired, Kevin knew that he would have been able to fight back. However, that was only wishful thinking on Kevin's end. There were no what-ifs in the world, and thus he could only fight against her in his current condition. In fact, the matriarch was also not in optimal condition. If the matriarch wasn't injured, Kevin would have long died by her first strike. Right now, he should have been rejoicing at the fact that he was still alive. KHHH. Sliding backward, Kevin couldn't feel his arms anymore. It felt as if a truck had rammed onto them, causing him to lose the sensation of both of his arms. Quickly glancing around and seeing no one, Kevin couldn't help but curse inwardly. Damn it, Ren, where are you? He could barely hold on. If Ren didn't come in 10 minutes, Kevin felt that he could very well be dying soon. Fua. Moving backward, Kevin managed to narrowly avoid the matriarch's palm. Thereafter, glancing at her, Kevin grit his teeth. Overdrive. He had no choice. He couldn't afford to hold back. He had to go all out in the beginning. He needed to buy enough time for Ren to come back. If there was one person who could help him, it was him. As long as he was here. Feeling every fiber of his muscles suddenly fill with tremendous energy, Kevin glared at the matriarch as he retaliated. Bam. Ha dash. Just as the matriarch's plan was about to hit Kevin one more time, to her surprise, she suddenly felt a tremendous force hit her palm, causing her to flinch slightly. Thereafter, she took one step back. Looking upwards towards Kevin in shock, it took a couple of seconds for her to realize what had finally happened. You. Opening her eyes wide, the matriarch glared at Kevin as her demeanor turned serious. Die. Thereafter, a red hue enveloped her body as she subsequently pushed her palm towards Kevin. This time, she exerted all of her force into the palm. She was planning on ending this in one move. Hue up. Staring at the matriarch's palm that was headed in his direction, a similar red hue enveloped Kevin's body. Thereafter, using his sword, Kevin hacked with every single bit of his energy. He knew he couldn't hold back. He could tell that the matriarch before him was planning on ending things quickly by using her strongest move early. Thus, without holding back, Kevin put everything he had in this one strike. His muscles bulged dramatically as the veins on his body became even more prominent. Gwa! Screaming out loud, he slashed forward as an overbearing sword energy shot out from the tip of his sword. Bomb! As the palm and sword connected, a huge shockwave swept the surroundings as the houses in the distance crumbled. The windows shattered and dust and debris flew everywhere. Shortly after, as the dust and debris disappeared, two figures could be seen standing a couple of meters from each other. Silence swept the surroundings as a tense atmosphere enveloped the area. Thud. After a short silence, one of the figures knelt down on one knee. KHHH. Damn it. Glaring at the matriarch that still stood a couple of meters away from him, Kevin cursed out loud. Subsequently after, as if a jolt of electricity coursed through his body, blue veins wiggled all over his body as his muscles started spasming. KHHHHH. Gritting his teeth and trying his best to endure the pain, Kevin couldn't help curse at his own weakness. He was still too weak. Even though he had just acquired a 5-star sword manual, because he had only just learned it, he could barely exert any power from it. If only he could use it. Damn it. Staring at the matriarch who was still standing, Kevin couldn't help but try his best to stand up. He wasn't going to die today. Not to a demon. He will not die. Staring at Kevin's rising figure, the matriarch couldn't help but be shocked by his power and determination. Although it looked as if she had come out on top, in reality, she still suffered a few internal injuries from the clash. But, they weren't as serious as Kevin's, who seemed to be on his last leg. Thus, indifferently glancing at Kevin, the matriarch prepared to attack one more time. I appreciate your determination, but this is the end for dash. However, just as the matriarch was about to finish speaking, the soft sound of footsteps echoed in the distance. Tap, tap. Slowly walking forward, Ren's indifferent face appeared in the distance. Snapping her head towards where the sound of the footsteps reverberated, the matriarch's eyes shot wide open as she venomously spat. It's you. The image of the youth that was walking in her direction directly overlapped with the photo that was given to her. Unbothered by the matriarch, Ren stared at Kevin, who was weakly standing in the distance. Nodding his head towards him, Ren slowly said, "Good enough." Staring at Ren, who was indifferently walking forward, Kevin smiled slightly as he supported his body with his sword. Took you long enough. Looking away from Kevin, Ren directly looked at the matriarch before him as he leisurely walked in her direction. As he did so, from the corner of his eyes, he slowly calculated each and every step he took. The pieces have been set, it was time to end this. The Author's POV. Chapter 131, New Piece, 5. Tap. Ren's footsteps halted as he stood 10 meters away from the matriarch. He indifferently gazed at her, who coldly stared back at him. A stifling atmosphere prevailed in the surroundings. Breaking the silence, the matriarch spoke. So you're him. The youth from the picture. Staring at Ren standing on the opposite side of her, the matriarch frowned. According to the report she got, her target was only an F-ranked kid. Someone that was far beneath her notice. In fact, she didn't believe that it was him that killed Elijah. How could an F rank kill a less than D rank? That was impossible. But, even if he didn't kill Elijah, he at least must know something. After all, what would Everblood gain from giving her such information? The only reason why she didn't attack Ren already was because of her wariness towards Kevin, who was slowly recovering. Moreover, she wanted answers. Staring at Ren, the matriarch coldly said, "Tell me, are you responsible for killing Elijah?" Staring at the matriarch before him, Ren didn't respond. He just stood there looking at her with no emotions. "Answer me." Seeing Ren being unresponsive, the matriarch screamed in anger as a red hue expanded out of her body, creating a gust of wind that swept everything near her away. Even so, Ren stood rooted where he was, completely unfazed by the matriarch's outburst. Seeing that Ren remained unfazed despite her show of might, the matriarch venomously spat. Yet another mute. If you refuse to speak, then I'll make you speak. Ren, watch out. Noticing that the matriarch was about to move, Kevin couldn't help shout as he tried to warn Ren about the incoming danger. Having gone against her before, Kevin knew how fast and powerful she was on another level compared to the people he had fought before. Although he didn't believe Ren was any weaker than him, if caught off guard, the situation could get serious. Moreover, even if she was injured, he didn't see any possibility of Ren being able to beat her. Answer me. Appearing right before Ren, the matriarch extended her hand forward and reached for his neck. Ren. However, contrary to Kevin's expectations, Ren didn't show any apprehension towards the matriarch and merely raised his left hand in the air. Thereafter, with his right hand on the grip of his sword, Ren snapped his fingers. Snap. KHHH. Just as the matriarch's hand was about to reach for his neck, her hand suddenly froze. In fact, not just her hand froze, but her whole body. The first movement of the Keiki style, quick flash. Thereafter, the world around the matriarch turned white as the last thing she heard was a subtle clicking sensation before she felt something pierce the scalp of her head. Click. Soon silence prevailed in the surroundings. What had happened? Just as Kevin saw the matriarch's hand reaching for his neck, opening his eyes wide, similarly to before when he was fighting the demon leader, the world around him turned white. Thud. Thereafter, as the world regained its color, what Kevin saw next made his blood freeze. With a large gaping hole on her forehead, the matriarch's body slowly fell onto the pavement as a large thud resounded across the place. The look on her face was that of utter shock. Staring at Ren, who remained indifferent, Kevin couldn't help but point towards him as his voice shook. How? Turning his head around and glancing at Kevin, Ren didn't answer. Pointing towards the distance, he slowly said, Kevin, go and break the dimensional space. Trying to say something, Kevin pointed towards the matriarch. Be you. Stopping Kevin mid-sentence, Ren's indifferent voice rang out again. Take care of it, I'll deal with her. After a couple of seconds, calming himself down, Kevin nodded his head. Since the fight against the demons started, Ren had become a completely different person. He seemed completely emotionless, almost as if anything in his eyes didn't matter. A stark difference compared to the Ren he had gotten to know these past few days, just what happened during that short period of time since the fight started. Sigh. In the end, an extended sigh escaped from Kevin's mouth. Although he had many things to ask, he knew that any type of conversation at the moment was useless. Talking to him now would be equivalent to talking to a wall. Pointless. All right. Thus, Kevin eventually nodded his head and prepared to look for the device responsible for creating the dimensional space. Although he didn't know where it was located, it shouldn't be hidden too far from them. Thus, glancing at Ren one more time, Kevin's eyes soon paused on the matriarch on the floor. Deeply staring at Ren for a couple of seconds, he eventually turned his head and went to look for the device. Watching Kevin's figure disappear in the distance, Ren subtly glanced towards the distance where a statue with two ruby-red eyes quietly sat on top of a building. E-ranked artifact twin gargoyle. Staring at the statue from below, Ren knew that the reason he managed to win was because of the artifact that he had picked up not long ago. Currently, the statue's eyes were staring right where the matriarch's body was laying down. Having caught a glimpse of the future thanks to the book, Ren had set everything up beforehand. The reason why he was absent when Kevin was fighting was because he was busy setting the pieces in motion, because he knew that he couldn't beat the matriarch one-on-one even if Kevin went all out or worked together with him. Using the book, Ren managed to devise a plan in which he could beat the matriarch. By having Kevin exhaust the matriarch beforehand, Ren took advantage of the time Kevin bought him to set everything up. Cross-referencing with the book, Ren managed to pinpoint the exact location at which the matriarch would move and carefully placed the artifact there. Right after he was done setting up the artifacts, right after Kevin was on the verge of losing, calculating the distance, Ren slowly approached the matriarch and stopped right before the gargoyle's statue operating area. The area where he stopped was also perfectly set up to lure the matriarch to him. Like this, when the matriarch attacked, all Ren did was snap his finger. Although it only stopped the matriarch for a split second, that was enough for Ren. Having calculated the timing, right before the matriarch froze due to the statues, Ren already activated the first movement of the Keiki style. Subsequently, as the matriarch was wide open due to her body freezing, Ren's sword directly pierced her in the head. Everything that happened was within Ren's calculation. Nothing escaped his perception. Stop pretending, wake up. Staring at the matriarch on the ground, Ren's indifferent voice rang out. Raising his sword in the air, he directly pierced her in the stomach. Spurt. Jaya. Letting out a pained scream, the matriarch's white eyes soon regained some clarity as she glared at Ren. Yo you. Staring at the matriarch, unfazed by the fact that she was still alive despite the hole in her forehead, Ren slowly said. You think I forgot about the fact that you higher-ranked demons only die when your core is destroyed? GHH. Hearing Ren's words, the matriarch glared at him as she tried to retaliate. However, her body refused to budge. Although she wasn't dead, her injuries were serious. Moreover, with her stomach currently pierced by Ren's sword, she could only helplessly lay down on the floor. Gritting her teeth, she angrily spat. GHHH. What do you want from me? Staring at the matriarch on the ground, with his sword imbued on her stomach, Ren slowly extended his hand towards her. Spurt. Thereafter, reaching out with his hand, to the matriarch's horror, his hand pierced her right where her heart was. Kaha. Screaming at the top of her lungs, the matriarch's eyes turned scarlet red as she looked at Ren's indifferent figure with absolute hatred. Yo you. Unbothered by this, taking his hand out from the matriarch's body, a red orb-like object appeared in Ren's hand. Staring at the orb, the matriarch's face turned crazed as she screamed at the top of her lungs. Don't you dare. Glancing at the matriarch whose body was flaying manically, observing the orb in his hand, Ren slowly said. According to the books in the academy, they say that upon ingesting a demon core, a human can take control of a demon. Pausing there, Ren played with the core on his hand. Once a demon reaches a noble rank, they develop a core. From there, the only way they can die is through directly breaking the core into pieces. KHHH. Squeezing the orb lightly, Ren's grip relaxed right after he saw the matriarch's face became pale. Because a demon can only die when their core is destroyed, humans found a way to control demons. By directly swallowing the core of a noble-ranked demon, we found out that by simply channeling the mana inside of our bodies, humans can directly break the core with a simple thought, resulting in the immediate death of the demon. Moreover, the demons can't even think of committing suicide as they can't die since their core isn't with them. Glancing at the matriarch whose face was incomparably dark, Ren slowly said. After years of fighting against the demons, this was what the humans came up with in order to fight against them, am I wrong? Listening to Ren speaking, the look of terror in the matriarch's eyes became more and more apparent. Being controlled by a human was considered taboo by the demons. Their worst possible nightmare. How could the proud demons stand being controlled by an inferior race like them? Impossible. To make things worse, once they were under the control of a human, even if they managed to get their core back, they would no longer be eligible for any important positions, nor would they be able to live like before, as they would be scorned daily by their fellow tribesmen. It was the worst possible outcome for any demon. Thus, staring at Ren, the matriarch pleaded. Don't do it. I'll give you all my belongings. Treasures. Indifferently glancing at the matriarch, Ren took the orb and slowly placed it in his mouth. Thereafter he swallowed it. Gulp. No. Watching Ren swallowing her core, the matriarch's blood-curdling scream resounded across the area. Fu-wam. Ingesting the orb, a gust of wind expanded from Ren's body as everything within the vicinity flew away. As this happened, the matriarch found herself looking at Ren with a look of despair plastered on her face. Stopping all signs of protests, the matriarch's eyes became hollow as she laid down on the ground and repeatedly mumbled. It's over, my life is over. Unbothered by her expression, Ren extended his hand towards her and coldly said. Be my peace. The Author's POV. Chapter 132, New Members, 1. Not so far from where Ren and the matriarch were, sitting on top of one of the rooftops of the houses in the distance, was a black humanoid figure. Cuckoo, oh, how interesting. With his legs dangling off of the roof of the building, the demon's body trembled uncontrollably as he tried his best to contain his laughter. However, this did not last for long, as he eventually laughed out loud and exclaimed. Cuckoo, ha 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 ha, how fantastic. Clapping his hands, the demon looked as though he had just watched the most entertaining movie in his whole life. He just couldn't stop clapping his hands as he continuously shouted praises in the air. Clap. 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 Cuckoo, what a fantastic twist to the story. Who would have expected such a twist? Ha ha ha, fantastic. Brilliant. Bravo. After a while, pausing and placing his hand on his mouth, Everblood's smile deepened. Glancing at the black coffin beside him, Everblood slowly caressed it with his long and skinny black fingers. Cuckoo, although I was supposed to be inside of the coffin recovering, my curiosity got the best of me, and eventually followed the matriarch here. I just really wanted to see him, you understand me, right? Glancing back towards Ren's figure in the distance, with his elbow on his knee, propping his head with his hand, Everblood's smile twisted. Cuckoo, when I saw you I almost couldn't hold back my impulse and almost appear before you. I really wanted to appear right before you. I have so many questions to ask. How have you been since the last time I saw you? Do you remember me? Just how much have you grown since the last time I saw you? Just how much more can you entertain me before I can throw you away? The number of questions I have for you are so many that I can't even know where to begin with. Pausing slightly, Everblood covered his face with his large black hand. Thereafter, his body shook slightly. Cuckoo, what I saw was a lot more than I could have ever bargained for. Cuckoo, to think that in such a short period of time you've grown up so splendidly, it was far beyond what I had expected. Holding onto his face with his long fingers, a look of insanity appeared in Everblood's eyes as he couldn't stop himself from salivating. In fact, you've even made me, a Baron-ranked demon, slightly fear you, but isn't that great? With this my thrive to crush you increased even more. Yes, just imagining your future growth is motivating me to reach further heights. Hugging his body tightly, Everblood shivered uncontrollably. Just the thought is sending shivers down my spine. Oh Ren, thank you so much. After a while, Everblood stopped and stared at the gargoyle statue not so far from where he was. Glancing back at the matriarch that was on the ground with a large gaping hole on her forehead, Everblood smiled. Although you've used some trickery to deal with her, it was still very impressive. I am impressed, very impressed. Such level of thought to detail and planning, you did not disappoint the expectations I had set for you. Staring at Ren extending his hand towards the matriarch, Everblood stopped for a second. Soon after, as he saw Ren pierce her heart and swallow her core, Everblood's body started shaking uncontrollably. Oh my. What's this? You're planning on taking Angelica under your control, Kukukuk, ha 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 ha, this is just amazing. To think you would do something like that, Kukuku, ha 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 ha. Laughing maniacally for the better part of a minute, Everblood eventually stopped. Thereafter, his face became serious. Fortunately, I had taken into account such a possibility beforehand. We wouldn't want our first meeting to be spoilt by something as insignificant as this now, do we? No one likes spoilers after all. Raising his right hand, Everblood snapped his fingers. Snap. With a snap of his fingers, the matriarch that was on the ground beneath Ren's feet opened her eyes wide for a split second. Thereafter, her eyes became white before quickly regaining their clarity. It was so subtle that no one noticed her behavior. Not even Ren, who under Monarch's indifference. Staring at the matriarch from above, Everblood nodded his head as a smile returned to his face. With this, she should have forgotten everything about me. During the last meeting with the matriarch, Everblood had given her a demon fruit that she had shortly after ingested in order to recover from her injuries. Having thought of the possibility of Ren possibly swallowing her demon core or interrogating her once he defeated her, Everblood decided to place a little something inside of the fruit. Although he didn't poison it as that could have been easily discovered by her, he did add a little bit of a surprise for her. A little curse that made her forget about the encounter she had with him. Many factors may have contributed to her not managing to find the curse, her unstable mental state, how well hidden the curse was, but out of all the reasons, the main one was the fact that the curse held no danger towards her. Because it wasn't a potent and dangerous curse, the matriarch was unable to sense the curse and thus swallowed the demon fruit without any wariness or apprehension. Big mistake. Staring at the matriarch who was tilting her head in confusion, Everblood looked at Ren and smiled even more deeply. We can't be having you knowing of my existence just yet, Ren. Such an important moment will be saved for when our little game will come to an end, so hold on tightly till then. I will eventually come for you, and when I do, the heavens will rejoice. Fwop. Extending his large bat-like wings, Everblood took the coffin of the cursed knight with him and silently slipped away in the distance. Glancing towards Ren one more time, he smiled and said, I'll be seeing you in a while, and when I do, next time, I'll let our game be even grander and more entertaining than ever before. Kukukuku, ahahaha. Saturday, Kaisa headquarters. Sitting on my desk with my hands interlocked together, I seriously looked at Small Snake, who had his arms crossed and was glaring at me from above. Ren, care to explain what's going on? Hearing Small Snake's flabbergasted and angry voice from the side, my mouth twitched. Explain what? Raising his brow, Small Snake retorted. Do I even need to point out what is wrong with the situation? Guess not. A week has passed since the incident in Roa, and it was already Saturday. Thus taking the weekend off, I decided to head back to the headquarters of my mercenary group to meet Leopold, whom Small Snake had just recruited. During the week I spent at the academy, nothing much happened apart from me regularly attending classes. The only notable change was Kevin, who seemed to be training even harder than before. Perhaps because of his loss against the matriarch, or because he got his hands on a 5-star sword manual, Kevin seemed to be putting everything he had into training. Well, normally I would have been happy with this development, as Kevin getting stronger was a good thing, but for the past week, my mind has been preoccupied with something else. Puff. Not so far from where Small Snake and I were, with his legs on the desk and puffing out a mouthful of smoke, Leopold stared at the ceiling of the room and joined in the conversation. I saw a lot of crazy stuff during my days in the Moonlight Mercenary Group, but this tops them all. If not for the fact that I knew this place was sketchy from the very beginning, I would have long refused to come here. Briefly glancing at Leopold from the corner of my eyes, I looked back towards Small Snake and seriously said, Small Snake, there may have been a little bit of a cock-up. Raising his brow, Small Snake pointed towards his right, where a beautiful woman coldly sat with her arms and legs crossed. Oh. Pray do tell me if that has anything to do with the demon that is in our office, who apparently has been staying here for the past week without me knowing. Coughing in embarrassment, I stood up and walked towards Angelica. Glancing at both Leopold and Small Snake, I introduced her to everyone. Kiam, let me introduce you to our guest. Angelica von Doix, previous matriarch of the Charm Tribe clan and a new member of our mercenary group. As I finished introducing her to everyone, the room instantly became quiet, as both Small Snake and Leopold were at a loss for words. With the cigarette still in his mouth, Leopold looked at Angelica, who was coldly looking back at them. It looked as though she wanted to skin everyone in the room alive. Puff. Removing the cigarette from his mouth and exhaling smoke in the air, Leopold couldn't help but say, well, that's one hell of a cock-up. The Author's POV. Chapter 133, New Members, 2. Sigh. Sighing out loud, I couldn't help but glance at the matriarch, no, Angelica, from the side. It's been a bit of a rough week for me. Under the influence of Monarch's indifference, it seems like I enslaved her and forcefully brought her here. Fortunately, I wasn't in any danger, as any time she would try to attack me, all I had to do was channel the mana inside of my body towards where the demon core I swallowed was located, and she would be subjected to immeasurable pain, stopping her from whatever she wanted to do. Like this, Angelica was pretty much under my control. However, even if she was under my control, that didn't mean she would do anything I asked of her. After all, although I could dictate her life and death with a simple thought, that was of no use for me. How could I use a pawn that refused to move? Such pawn wasn't something that I needed nor wanted. There was no point in me keeping her if she refused to listen to my orders. I didn't need such liability to stick with me, especially not when considering how dangerous of a person she was. Ooh. Leaning back on my chair as I exhaled, I started thinking of a way to fix this problem. Although I hate to say it, taking her in was in fact the right decision. Considering her strength, she was probably the strongest person among us in the mercenary group, and by quite a large margin at that. Moreover, she could still grow stronger, especially since I knew of a couple of things that could benefit her growth. Glancing at the matriarch, who was coldly sitting not so far from where I was, massaging my chin, my mind raced. Since I already swallowed her core, she was definitely somewhat under my control. The problem was, how do I get her to willingly follow my orders without betraying me? Although the demons seemed united, in reality, they weren't. If not for the Demon King keeping them in check with his overwhelming power, all hell would have broken loose among their ranks, and I could use this fact to my advantage. The fact that her loyalty towards their own race wasn't very strong. Thinking thus far, I glanced towards Small Snake and Leopold, who were both looking at me. Thereafter, nodding slightly towards them, I said, Small Snake, Leopold, can you guys give us a minute? Staring at me for a couple of seconds, Small Snake's head alternated between me and Angelica a couple of times before he eventually nodded his head. All right. Standing up from his seat, and tossing the cigarette in his hand towards the trash can, Leopold lightly waved his hand as he followed Small Snake out of the room. Take your time, boss. Clank. Shortly after they left, as the doors to the room closed, silence enveloped the room. Breaking the silence, I looked at the matriarch and lightly said, So, still not speaking? Crossing my legs, I stared at the matriarch who was quietly sitting in her chair. Ever since I brought her here, she didn't speak a single word. She neither complained nor lashed out. I guess that was her way of telling me that she won't do anything I ask of her. Smiling inwardly, I lightly covered my mouth to hide the smirk that had appeared on my face. Staring at Angelica, who was coldly looking back at me, seemingly wanting to devour me whole, I lightly spoke. "Do you want your freedom back?" Frowning, Angelica didn't respond. There was no way she would believe anything that came from my mouth. In her head, I was a vile worm that only won due to some trickery. To her, every word that I spoke was merely a trap devised to trick her into doing something that she didn't want to do. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Coldly staring at me from her seat, Angelica tried her best to hold herself back from lunging at me in hopes of killing me. Noticing her unresponsiveness, I once again spoke. "Let me rephrase, do you want your core back?" Once again, Angelica refused to speak. Unbothered by this, as I lazily leaned on my chair, I continued speaking, knowing that I had gotten her attention. "You see, returning your core isn't actually that hard of a task for me, it's just that it really wouldn't be profitable on my end, you understand." Pausing and looking at Angelica straight in her eyes, I smiled and said, "If I were to return you the core, what can you offer me?" Staring at me for a couple of seconds, after a short pause she said, "What do you want?" Hearing her speak, I couldn't help but lightly chuckle as I spoke. "Ah, so you can speak. Doesn't this situation seem a bit ironic? I remember you calling me a mute before dash." Cutting me off, Angelica's cold voice echoed across the room. "Get to the point." Smiling slightly, I sat up straight. Staring at the matriarch in the eyes, I shook my finger. "Tut tut, just listen to what I have to say. I will offer you a deal, and you will decide whether you agree or not." Pausing there for a second, my demeanor turned serious as I coldly looked at her as a white hue started emanating from my body. "Don't think that just because I'm keeping you alive means that I won't kill you in the future. After all, what use does a chess piece that doesn't function have for me? Me offering you a deal is your last chance at keeping your life. If you choose to refuse, only death awaits you." Seriously staring at Angelica for a couple of seconds, after a while, I smiled and my usual lazy and cheerful demeanor came back. Clapping my hand, I lightly said, "All right, now that the serious stuff has been said, tell me. What are you willing to offer me in exchange for your core?" Without hesitation, as soon as I finished speaking, Angelica said, "Money, information, won't dash." Extending my hand forward, I stopped her as I shook my head. "Sorry, I was lying when I said that. I already know what I want." Seriously looking at me, Angelica's ears perked as she leaned slightly forward to hear. "What do you want?" Smiling slightly, I pointed towards her and teased, "You." Opening her eyes wide, Angelica stood up and glared at me. "You filthy bastard." "Wow, calm down, I was just joking, relax." Raising my hands up, I lightly laughed after seeing her reaction. If not for the fact that a white hue was revolving around my body, she would have already assaulted me. Fiercely glaring at me, Angelica snorted. "Humph, if you say one more joke like that, even if I die, I'll make sure to bring you down with me." Raising my brow, I shook my head. Thereafter, raising my left hand, I opened my palm and calmly said, 5. Calming down, Angelica raised her brow as she tilted her head to the side in confusion. 5 what? Briefly glancing at the palm of my hand, I looked towards Angelica in the eyes and said, 5 years. I want you to work for me for 5 years. I've thought this through. For the past week, I spent a lot of time thinking about how to solve the issue revolving around Angelica. 5 years. That's how long I was planning on keeping her. For the next 5 years, she will work for me as a member of the mercenary group. Of course, that wasn't the true end goal. The hope was that in those 5 years that she stayed with us, she would become loyal towards us. If I showed her enough benefits, I was sure that such task was possible. Moreover, even if in those 5 years she eventually left, she wouldn't be able to go back to the demons. With her core having been taken from her once, getting her old position back was no longer a feasible option. If she were to come back, the highest position she would get would be that of an Elder One, and for someone who had already tasted the power that came from being a leader, I knew very well that it wasn't something she was willing to accept. Especially not if the leader was someone she used to boss around. Her pride wouldn't allow it. Noticing Angelica fall into deep thought, I patiently sat back and waited for her to give me a response. After a while, looking at me, Angelica softly said, "Mana contract." Leaning forward, I couldn't quite grasp what she said as her voice was too soft for me to hear. Noticing that I didn't understand, speaking louder, Angelica said, "I said I will only do this if we sign a mana contract." Pausing slightly, glancing at Angelica in front of me for a second, a large smile appeared on my face as I said, "But of course." It was originally something that I was planning on proposing to her. However, it seems like she beat me to it. A mana contract. A contract that ties two people with the power of mana. Upon setting the terms and signing it, the two people under the contract must fulfill the other end of their bargain. If one person fails to complete their end, death awaited them, and a very painful one at that. The mana around their body would become erratic and their body would explode into pieces. It was probably one of the worst possible deaths someone could ever ask for. Though mana contracts were quite expensive, they were worth the cost, as this way I wouldn't need to worry about the other person not holding the other end of their deal. This method was more efficient than just me threatening Angelica, as now she would obediently follow my orders until the contract expired. After all, now that she had a goal to work for, she would definitely comply with my orders as long as they weren't unreasonable. Moreover, I didn't need to worry about her betraying me for as long as the contract run, as this could be one of the terms I could insert in the contract. Everything was perfect. Nodding my head in satisfaction, and seeing that Angelica too was satisfied with the outcome, I brushed my hair to the side and asked her something that had been on the back of my mind for a while. "Now, let's get to the main point. Since you're willing to make a contract with me, it's about time I ask you about some things that I have been meaning to ask from before, no?" Blinking twice, Angelica looked at me in the eyes and slowly said, "It depends on what you're asking." Hearing her response, a faint smile appeared on my lips. So she still had some loyalty towards the demons, huh? It was understandable, they were her race after all. No matter how much she detested them, she would still have some loyalty towards them, but that's fine. I really wanted to see if her opinion would still be the same by the time those 5 years end. I really was starting to get curious. In 5 years' time, will you still be my pawn, or will you be something that I will have to discard? Will you choose to follow me after everything I will show you, or will you go back to the demons? Smiling to myself, I paused my thoughts there. Staring at Angelica in the eyes, I asked her the question that had been bothering me for a long time. What I wanted to ask is, why did you think it was me that killed Elijah when everything pointed towards Amanda being the killer? Moreover, why me? The Author's POV. Chapter 134, New Members, 3. As soon as I posed the question, the room became tense. Staring at Angelica straight in the eyes, I asked her something that had been bothering me since last week. Why did she target me, and how did she find out that I was the one responsible for killing Elijah when every news outlet and evidence pointed towards Amanda being the one responsible for killing Elijah? Moreover, this past week I looked through the list of guests that were present in the party and none of them were targeted by her. Something just didn't add up. Staring at me for what felt like an eternity, Angelica slowly said, "Because I could feel how Elijah died, and it wasn't with a bow." Frowning slightly, I repeated in confusion. "Wasn't with a bow?" How did she know? I made sure to hide all of my traces when I killed Elijah, so how was it possible for her to find out something that even the Union couldn't figure out? Noticing the confusion in my face, Angelica explained. When one of our contract acts dies, apart from having our souls become damaged, we are also subjected to the pain they experience right before dying. Therefore, after Elijah died, I was able to tell that what had killed him wasn't a bow, as the hit was far too clean for something that an arrow could do. Listening to Angelica explain, the frown on my face deepened. Interesting. I didn't know that. I really didn't know. I don't ever recall writing about something like this in the novel, although I have come to realize that referencing to the novel too much was bad as things tended to become different. It still came as a shock to me to realize that I didn't even know such important information. Especially since this piece of information was quite important. Placing my hand on my chin as I fell into deep thought, I eventually looked at Angelica before asking. "All right, I understand why you didn't target Amanda, but again, why me?" Opening her mouth, mid-sentence, Angelica frowned. Thereafter a blank look appeared on her face as she looked at me in confusion. "Well, that's because, Noticing the oddity in her behavior, I leaned forward. "Because." After a while, shaking her head, Angelica said, "I don't remember." Taken aback, the frown on my face deepened. "You don't remember?" Placing her slender fingers towards the middle of her brows, after a couple of seconds, Angelica shook her head as a blank look appeared on her face. No matter how much I try to remember, I can't seem to recall why I was targeting you. Sitting up straight, interlocking my hands on the desk and resting my chin on it, the frown on my face deepened even more. Strange. Staring at Angelica for a couple of seconds, I leaned back on my seat and pondered. Out of all the responses that I wanted to hear, this one was probably on the bottom of my list. I can't remember. Was what she said. Was she lying? Staring at Angelica, who seemed to be trying her best to recall, I lightly tapped on my desk. Tap. Tap. I wasn't sure, but I doubted it. After all, she knew I could force the answer out when proposing for it to be in the mana contract, therefore, chances were that she really couldn't remember. The real question was, how? Did someone perhaps have a hand in this? Or was her memory that bad? I doubt the latter was true, hence it could only mean one thing. Someone had a hand at this. As soon as my thoughts paused there, my face became solemn. Turning towards Angelica, I carefully asked, "What is the last thing you remember before forgetting your memories?" Glancing at me for a brief moment, Angelica's brows tightly knit as she tried her best to recall anything that she could regarding what had happened prior to targeting me. As she spoke, from time to time she would pause as an occasional look of confusion appeared on her face. I remember fighting against my previous subordinates before eventually winning, and then from there my memories start becoming a blur. However, I do remember someone handing me a picture of you. Taken aback, seriously glancing at Angelica, I couldn't help but repeat. A picture of me? Nodding her head, Angelica confirmed. Yes, but that's all I can remember. I don't remember who gave me the picture, but I remembered them saying something like the person in the picture was responsible for killing Elijah. From there everything is self-explanatory as I started. Who? Listening to Angelica speak, I couldn't help but take a deep breath. This news was shocking. Someone was targeting me. Realistically speaking, the only person that came to my mind at the moment was Matthew. He was the only person I could think of that would target me. No, wait. Tap. 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 Tapping frantically on my desk, I realized that Matthew wasn't the only one that could have been targeting me. There was someone else that could have done this. If we were talking about demons, it would be Everblood. He was another demon that I had come in contact with back in the dungeon, but at that time I was wearing a mask, so chances of him not finding out that. Abruptly pausing my thoughts there, I couldn't help but ask myself. Wait, did I have a mask on? Did Everblood see my face back in the dungeon? Massaging my forehead, I started looking back at the incident in the dungeon. At that time, I recall almost dying at the hands of Everblood's clone. I was too busy trying to preserve my life at that time that I wasn't sure about what had happened afterward. Did my mask fall off and he found out my identity? If so, it seems that Everblood may indeed be one of the people that could have been targeting me, but something still didn't add up. Glancing at Angelica sitting on her seat, I couldn't help but think. Why use her and not come personally? If it really was Everblood that was targeting me, why did he use her instead of going personally? After thinking for a long time and coming up with nothing, I helplessly shook my head. I didn't have enough evidence to find out who the real culprit was, but that didn't matter. It only meant that I had to be alert at all times. I needed to be more cautious and grow stronger even faster. I now knew that things beyond the plotline would start targeting me now. I could no longer be as carefree as before. I needed to be alert at all times, especially for when the time that another similar situation arose. From now on I have to be prepared for anything. Sigh. Sighing out loud, I stood up and lightly stretched my neck. Glancing at Angelica, whose face was still cold, I faintly smiled before saying, "All right, I guess that's enough talking for now. I will come back later with a mana contract. I will probably send it to you, and after you read through the contents you can decide whether you want to sign or not. If you want to negotiate the terms that I posed, text me directly." Tilting her head to the side, Angelica looked at me and asked with a hint of confusion in her voice. "Text?" Seeing the confusion in Angelica's face, I couldn't help but lightly smack my face. Right, demons don't use phones." With a slight frown on her face, Angelica tried to recall where she heard the word phone before and slowly said, "Phone? Are those the primitive devices that you humans use to communicate with each other?" Staring at Angelica for a couple of seconds, I nodded to myself. Yeah, I'll leave that task to Small Snake to handle. Wasn't going to have any part of this. Inwardly shaking my head as I imaged the predicament that Small Snake would find himself in, I put on my jacket and said, "All right, I have to go back to the academy now. If you have any questions, you can ask Small Snake." Tilting her head to the side, recalling the two individuals that were here before, Angelica bluntly said, "Small Snake. Which one is it? The primate or the stick?" Pursing my lips, I tried my best to keep a straight face. After a couple of seconds, I slowly said, "The stick." Nodding her head, Angelica said, "Very well, I shall take note of such individual. As long as I get my core back, I shall not care for such insignificant matters." "Good for you." 10 p.m. Smiling at Angelica, I glanced at my watch. It was about time I returned to the academy. Although I had skipped going through the details about what Angelica was going to do once she worked for me in the mercenary group, that was a talk for a later time. After all, we still had to sign the mana contract first. Once she joined, I will then proceed to tell her more regarding the mercenary group. Plus, with her now joining my group, that would mean that we had a total of 4 members in our group. Only one member short before being able to start doing missions together. Thereafter from there, we could slowly increase the mercenary group rank as we complete more and more missions. Moreover, with Angelica in the group, rising to rank 2 would be a breeze. Thinking thus far, I was reminded of Ava. Yes, from what I read from the report Small Snake had given me, she along with Ryan were the 2 people that only needed a little push to join the group. If I wanted to start doing missions with my group, I first needed to sign the 5th member. And aside from Ryan, Ava was the one that was easiest to recruit. Who? Exhaling out loud, I massaged my forehead before walking out of my office. I really wonder how strong our group will be in the future. The Author's POV. Chapter 135, Moving Out, 1. ZIIP. HAAA. Exhaling, I put my arms on my waist and nodded my head in satisfaction. After returning from my little trip to the headquarters of my mercenary group, I quickly returned to the lock. There was a particular reason for that, and that was that today I was finally moving out of my dorm and finally moving to a better one. The Manticore building. A considerable upgrade compared to the Horned Sheep building which I was currently staying in. It didn't need to be pointed out as to why the Manticore building was better, as after all, I was going to get my own training room as well as a personal butler. Just those 2 things alone showed just how much better the place was. If I did have a complaint though, it would be about the price. Believe it or not, I was roughly paying 100,000 U in monthly rent, yeah. Very pricey, as that would mean that I was basically paying 1,200,000 U in yearly rent. Expensive, but worth it. With me having my own private training room, I no longer had to hold back when training. I could finally go all out and train without needing to worry about others discovering any of my secrets. And yes, although I could have gone to the Hydra building, the one that was even better than the Manticore building, I firmly was against the idea. Too expensive and was filled with annoying young masters. To hell with that. Aside from that, the main reason as to why I moved towards the Manticore building rather than the Hydra building was because Ava was here. With her being in the same building as me, there was more room for me to interact with her. At the very least, I wanted to interact with her in a more organic way rather than me creepily approaching her in class. It just would look very suspicious in my opinion. Either way, this move wasn't solely for me, as it was also going to be a big help for me in increasing the chances of recruiting Ava to my group. All in all, today was going to be a good day. Alright. Voum. Tapping my bracelet once, all of the packages before me disappeared. Let's see, is there anything else I am missing? After making sure I took every package in front of me, stepping outside my dorm, I took one last glimpse at the insides of my room and checked to see if there was anything I was missing. After a couple of minutes, making sure that nothing was missing, I couldn't help but look back at the time I spent in this place. Although the 4 months I had been in this dorm were short, I couldn't say I disliked the place. If not for the private training facility, I would have opted to stay here rather than move. After all, I would have rather have saved money. But the situation called for it, and I really needed my own private training room, therefore I had no choice but to switch. HAAA. Exhaling out loud and glancing at the long scar on the wall to the right, my mouth couldn't help but twitch. Thereafter, turning off the lights, I closed the door of the room and left. Clank. The scar had nothing to do with me. Name and student card. Arriving at the Manticore building reception, I was immediately greeted by a stern-looking middle-aged man. The middle-aged man before me had a long face, a well-formed nose, and puffy lips. His light brown hair was carefully brushed to the side to give him a cleaner look. However, his droopy eyes that had black circles beneath them gave everything away as he looked to be on the verge of fainting any minute from now. Staring at the receptionist before me, I couldn't help but feel a trace of pity for him. Especially since another notable feature of his was his straight brown hair that was showing signs of thinning. It looked like he was really having a bad time here. "Here you go, my name is Ren." Complying with his request, I handed him my student ID card and told him my name. Thank you." Without looking at me, the middle-aged man lazily took my card. A couple of minutes after taking my card, after checking the card's information and compiling a couple of paperworks, the middle-aged man briefly glanced at me before a large yawn escaped from his mouth. All the rules and stuff will shortly be sent to your phone, so if you have any questions, look over there." Thereafter, taking out a purple card from one of the drawers of his desk, he swiftly handed it to me before closing his eyes and crossing his arms. Staring at the man, my mouth twitched as I shook my head at his behavior. "Thank you, I guess." Turning around, I looked at the card in my hand and saw an 906 engraved on it. Thereafter, I quickly headed towards the elevators. As I walked along the corridor of the building, I was impressed by the internal design of the building. Especially the lighting, as the corridor I was walking on was illuminated with a soft and welcoming light, as if it were a sunshine in gentle pastel hue. The floor was made out of marble and a long red carpet covered most of the pavement as it directly led towards the elevator area. Thus, following the red carpets and arriving in front of the elevators, I quickly pressed a button and patiently waited for the elevator to come down. Taking a deep breath, now that I sorted everything out, I looked back at the incident with Angelica. Having pondered over the matter for a while, I realized that I was too arrogant and carefree. The actions that I took led to someone targeting me. Pausing my thoughts there, a frown emerged on my face as I couldn't help but think about the fact that they could have also targeted my parents. If the person targeting me went after my parents, I wouldn't know what I would have done at the time. Would the old Ren have taken over my body and done something reckless as a consequence, or would I be the one doing something reckless? I wasn't sure, but I wasn't eager to find out. Fortunately, because the one that was targeting me seemed to be a demon, they didn't touch my parents, as they soon noticed that they were under a curse from another demon, and killing someone that was already being targeted by a demon was essentially a very big no-no for the demons, as that would mean that they were basically stealing someone else's food and declaring war on them, and fortunately, because of this, my parents were currently still unharmed. I guess the fact that they were cursed wasn't all too bad. I mean, it did save their lives. But still, what if my enemy wasn't a demon, but a human? What would have happened then? I was too naive and immature. I needed to put further thought into every one of my actions from now on. Come up with countermeasures for everything. That's why setting up this mercenary group was a must for me. Only when I had true power would I not need to worry about such things. I had to get even stronger than I was now. Ding! Snapping me out of my thoughts was the loud chime coming from the elevator. Entering the elevator, without skipping a beat, I quickly pressed the button that led to the 9th floor. The Manticore building had 15 floors, and the current floor I was headed towards was the 9th floor, where my room, 906, was located. Recalling something, I quickly pulled out my phone and checked my notifications. There. Tapping on my phone, I quickly looked through my inbox before clicking on a certain email that had an attached file on it. Opening the file, I quickly started reading through the contents. To summarize, the butler will only be assigned to me in a month after I choose him from a list that will later be given to me. What else? A personalized diet will also be made for me. As I read through the contents shown in the email attachment, I started to become more and more satisfied with my decision. I probably should have done this sooner. With all of the benefits and services I was being provided, it felt as if I was staying in a 5-star hotel. It was amazing. Ding! Exiting the elevator, I was greeted with a small corridor that split into two, left and right. Checking my phone, I turned right, and after walking past a couple of doors, I was soon able to see a door with the number 906 displayed on the side. Without hesitation, I swiped my card on the door. Shortly after, as the doorknob turned green, I opened the door to my room. Click. Entering the room, I was immediately stunned by what I saw. The first thing I saw was a large window inside of the living room that illuminated the whole place. Thereafter, I noticed all of the decorations around the place. From clean white sofas to a personal kitchen furnished with all sorts of utensils. Compared to my previous dorm, it felt as I was going from the slums to the main city. A huge difference. Turning right of the living room, I soon spotted the bedroom that had a large white bed in the middle. There were a couple of other decorations in this place, however, that wasn't what attracted me. No, it was in fact a door that was by the side of the bedroom. Without hesitation, I immediately headed for the door and opened it. This was the only thing that interested me at the moment. Click. Opening the door, I instantly felt cool air brushed past my clothes. Thereafter, looking at the room, a look of amazement appeared on my face. Phew, this is exactly why I moved here. A large spacious room that was twice the size of the living room appeared before me. On the right side of the room, multiple different types of equipment ranging from dumbbells, squat racks, and all sorts of other gym equipment appeared before me. Moreover, they all seemed to be made by state-of-the-art tech, as the largest dumbbells, which were the 500 kilograms ones, were only about the size of a water bottle. Very small. That aside, on the left side of the room, there was no equipment or anything of the sort. However, the pavement and the sides of the wall were made of a special material that was shock absorbent. Essentially, that area was the area in which I could peacefully train my sword art without worrying about leaving a scar behind like what had happened to me before. As I looked at the gym, a satisfied grin appeared on my face as I couldn't help myself from exclaiming out loud. "Ah, the more I stay here, the more I realize how I should have done this before. Now that no one is disturbing me during my training, I don't have to hold back during training, as I can just go all out." Ding. Dong. Just as I was happily admiring my new training room, I suddenly heard the sound of my doorbell ring. Taken aback for a brief moment, a slight frown appeared on my face. Who? I don't recall knowing anyone that was here. So who could it possibly be? The Author's POV. Chapter 136, Moving Out, 2. Clank. Opening the door to my room, I was immediately greeted by two individuals standing in front of the door. "Hello. Nice to meet you." "Yes. How can I help you?" Standing on the right side, with a friendly smile on his face, was a rather lanky individual with long curly blonde hair and green eyes. Extending his hand towards me, he introduced himself and his friend on the left, who was a stark contrast from him in terms of appearance. "Nice to meet you. I'm Leo Smith from room 905 and he's Ram Johnson from room 907. With a bulging belly and greasy ginger-colored hair, the individual on the left, Ram, had a rather awkward but friendly smile on his face as he nodded his head. "Good evening." Alternating my gaze between the two of them, I raised my brow and looked to my left and right where rooms 905 and 907 were. Thereafter, smiling at them, I said, "Oh. Do you guys live next door? Doesn't that mean we are neighbors?" Nodding his head, smiling kindly, Leo said, "Yup. We just received notice that someone was moving in today, and we wanted to be the first ones to greet you." Smiling back, I extended my hand towards them and introduced myself to them. "That's very kind of you. Hello, I'm a first year and my name is Rendover. Pleased to meet you." Nodding their heads, Leo and Ram shook my hand. "Pleased to meet you." "Nice to meet you too." Shaking my hand, a couple of seconds after we let go, a rather awkward silence enveloped the corridor. Noticing this, glancing at my room, I suggested, "Do you want to come in?" Hearing my suggestion, looking at each other, Ram and Leo nodded their heads. "That would be ideal. Thank you." Seeing how friendly they were being, I decided to let them in. Although this place was filled with arrogant brats, that didn't mean everyone was like that. Seeing at how they didn't arrogantly look down on me or try to establish their dominance upon our first meeting, I knew that the two of them were rather nice individuals. It was a nice change of pace considering what I was constantly going through in class. "All right, please come in." Smiling even more brightly, I stepped to the side and let them in. It was a good thing they came, as I had a few things to ask them with regards to this building. Smiling, Leo looked towards Ram and gestured for him to go in. "After you." "Thanks." Nodding his head, Ram entered the room followed by Leo shortly after. Thereafter, seeing that the both of them had entered the room, looking left and right to see if there was anyone else, I eventually closed the door. Clank. Closing the door, I turned around and said, "Welcome. Although I just moved in here, the place was already furnished before I came, so just have a seat while I make some tea." "Sure. Thank you." Nodding their heads, Leo and Ram calmly walked towards the sofas and sat down. As they walked towards the sofas, from the side of my eyes, I managed to observe that they seemed to be rather familiar with the layout of the apartment. It seems like their rooms were similarly decorated. Hugh. Seeing that Leo and Ram were comfortably sitting on the sofa, heading towards the kitchen, I quickly heated a teapot and exhaled lightly. This was the first time I met people that were either not arrogant brats or novel characters. I didn't want to leave a bad impression. After all, being a loner wasn't really something I loved. A couple of seconds after Leo and Ram sat down, coming back with a steaming pot of tea, I sat on one of the sofas and poured tea for them. Thank you. Thanks. Thanking me and taking the teacups in front of them, Leo and Ram carefully took a sip of it. Placing the teapot down and blowing on my teacup, I looked at them and asked, "You guys are also first years?" Taking a sip of the tea and savoring the taste for a couple of seconds, placing the teacup down, Leo looked at me and nodded his head. "Yeah, I'm from Class A23 and he's from Class A19, what about you?" "Class A25. As soon as finished speaking, silence enveloped the room. Thereafter, I saw both Leo and Ram look at me with a trace of pity in their eyes. "I feel bad for you." "Yeah." Confused, I couldn't help but tilt my head to the side and ask, "Why's that? Aren't you in the same class filled to the brink with second-generation kids whose arrogance knows no bounds? Isn't it tense?" Frowning slightly, I couldn't help but ask, "Is it not like that for you?" Glancing at each other, Leo and Ram simultaneously shook their heads. Taking another sip of the tea, Leo softly said, "Nothing of the sorts, our class is pretty chill. Moreover, everyone is united and we don't form our own cliques like your class does." Frowning and interlocking my hands together, I leaned forward and asked, "How come?" "Well, it's because there really isn't anyone important in our class, you get what I mean." Thinking for a moment, I shook my head. No, not really." Nodding his head, calmly placing the teacup down, Leo explained. "Basically, because there really isn't anyone important in our class, no one needs to suck up to someone else's ass. If I had to say, our class is pretty balanced. Ram's class as well as everyone just gets along with each other rather than having someone commanding others and stuff like that." Listening to Leo speak, from time to time Ram would add a few things and nod his head in agreement. Although we do have some people that have a stronger background because the majority in our class is of similar background, we are rather united and thus no such thing happens." Placing my hand on my chin as I listened to them speaking, I lightly nodded my head. I see. It made sense. With how most of the arrogant second-generation kids ended up in my class, it wasn't strange that they had all formed their own cliques and segregated themselves from the other students, resulting in this imbalance forming within the class. After a while, looking at both Leo and Ram, I couldn't help but jokingly say, "Let me join your classes." After a short pause, staring at each other, we all lightly chuckled. "Ha ha ha. Ha ha ha." Chuckling along with them, halfway through my chuckle, I stopped laughing and seriously said, "Ha ha ha, I wasn't joking. I really wasn't." Maybe at first, but the more I thought about it, the more I wanted to move out. Their place sounded like paradise in my opinion. Although now that I took care of Arnold and a few other annoying brats, the fact that I was still ignored and verbally abused from time to time didn't change. And just like they said, almost everyone in my class was part of an influential family or whose parents were important figures in their own right. If I wanted to deal with them, I had to be thorough. I couldn't just pick a fight with anyone I wanted. Especially considering the fact that I had a family to look after now, as they could target them at any time without my knowledge. This fact became even more apparent with the incident with the matriarch. Actions had consequences, and unless I thoroughly destroyed my enemy until I made sure they weren't going to take revenge on me, I couldn't move. Hence why, their classes sounded like paradise to me. A place where I didn't have to think too much about my behavior. Looking at me with a trace of pity in his eyes, Leo tried to console me. "I feel for you, but classes change every year so you might get lucky next year." Leaning backward on the sofa, a bitter smile appeared on my face as I sarcastically said, "Haha, if only I was that lucky." He wasn't wrong. Every year we would be assigned to different classrooms, so perhaps next year I would get lucky. But considering my luck so far, I could only helplessly sigh. Ding. Dong. As I was having a good chat with Leo and Ram, suddenly, the doorbell rang once again. Turning towards the door, I looked at Leo and Ram for a brief moment before saying, More neighbors. Seriously looking at each other, Ram and Leo's faces became tense. Thereafter, grabbing me by my sleeve, Leo carefully said, Ren, be careful. Raising my brow and looking at them carefully, I couldn't help but slowly ask, What's wrong? Looking at each other, after a short pause, Leo quietly spoke. We were planning on telling you this later, but actually, this building is not as peaceful as it sounds. Frowning, I suddenly had an ominous feeling. Not as peaceful as it sounds. Nodding his head, Leo and Ram looked towards the door with a little bit of fear. Yeah. Noticing Leo and Ram's odd behavior, the frown on my face deepened. If I said I was surprised by this development, that would be a lie. From experience, I could pretty much guess what was happening. Although I didn't know much about this place, it seems like there was a social hierarchy here that I did not know of. Whoever was at the door was definitely someone that I wasn't going to have the pleasure of knowing. Ding. Dong. Coming. Staring at the door, I looked towards Ram and Leo before making my way towards the door. I'll have to observe first before making a move. The Author's POV. Chapter 137, Moving Out, 3. Sorry for my tardiness. Swoosh. Opening the door and scratching the back of my head, on the other side of the door, I saw 3 people standing with their backs straight. As soon as I opened the door, a surge of powerful aura came crashing in, creating a powerful gush of air that reminded me of a typhoon. Feeling the gush of air brush past me as my clothes fluttered lightly, I tried my best to keep my smile on my face as I looked at the people before me. Taking a closer look, there were 3 people. The 3 people looked to be in their 20s, however, considering that they were all wearing lock uniforms, they were still not there in terms of age. Their ranks looked to be at around the F rank region, with the weakest of them being F-. They each wore green-colored uniforms indicating that they were in their second years, and the one leading them, the strongest one of the lot, I could feel his rank being at around F+. The reason I knew this was because they didn't shy away from releasing their oppressive aura. Their intentions were obvious. Intimidate me. Well, it was supposed to suppress me, but it really had no effect on me at the moment. Still, I pretended to grimace under their pressure. KKHH, who is this? Observe before acting. Seeing my reaction, keeping the pressure for a couple of seconds before removing it, the leading youth looked at me as he said in a solemn voice. You're the one that just moved in. Pretending to catch my breath, I slowly nodded my head and responded. Huff, huff, indeed. As I responded to them, I tried my best to hold back. Although the way they talked and behaved irked me, I had to hold it in until I found out who their backer was. Chances were that they were someone I should probably not offend for the time being. After making sure he had exerted his dominance over me, the leading youth briefly glanced at his 2 lackeys behind him before looking back at me and saying, My name is Noah Riley, a fellow student who resides in this building. Currently, I am gathering all of the people in this building for our usual end-of-the-week meeting. Seeing that you are here, you should also come and introduce yourself. Don't worry, he just wants to get to know you better and help you adapt to this place faster. Said Noah in a casual manner. Although he claimed that he was requesting for a word, his tone didn't contain any trace of request. It seems like something annoying was about to happen. Overbearingly stepping into my room without asking for my permission, Noah and his lackeys glanced around the room before a smirk emerged on their faces as they saw the 2 people inside of the room. Turning his attention towards them, crossing his arms, Noah snorted as he spoke. Humph, it seems like Leo and Ram are also here. Perfect, you guys must come with us too. Silently clenching their fists beneath their clothes, Leo and Ram both smiled towards Noah and stood up. Yes. Understood. Nodding his head in satisfaction, Noah calmly watched as Leo and Ram left the room with their heads hung low. Thereafter, turning his attention towards me, he said, Hurry up as we don't have much time to waste. All right. Watching from the side, I calmly observed everyone present in the room. From the way that the trio was looking down at Leo and Ram, and by how they both refused to retaliate. Although I wanted to help them, as they were the first people I actually got along with in this academy, now was not the time. From the way I saw things, it seems like whoever was backing the trio was rather powerful. To give his lackeys that much confidence. From the way they spoke and talked, it looked as though they owned the place, this situation may indeed become troublesome. After making sure Leo and Ram went out, looking at me, nudging me with his head, Noah coldly said, "Follow along." Smiling amiably, I nodded my head. "Sure. Good choice." Seeing me nod, Noah turned around and left. Nodding his head towards his two lackeys, Noah directly turned right and walked through the long corridor that seemed to stretch to no end. As I looked at Noah and the rest from behind, for a split second my eyes narrowed. Thereafter, an amiable smile appeared on my face as I closed the door behind me. Clank. I really am curious as to who the person they are following is. Taking the elevator and going all the way up to the 15th floor, we soon arrived in front of a large wooden door decorated with fine golden patterns. Straightening their backs and clothes, Noah and his two lackeys carefully fixed their clothes and made themselves look presentable. Turning my head to the side, I soon noticed Leo and Ram shivering slightly as they had their heads held down. Observing everyone around me, I carefully imprinted everyone's behavior in my mind. This was so that I could get an idea of who I was about to meet. All right. After making sure that they looked presentable, fixing his hair, Noah carefully knocked on the large door. Knock. Knock. Thereafter, a couple of seconds after Noah knocked on the door, opening the door was a young man dressed in a butler outfit. With his black hair neatly brushed to the side and wearing a nice butler outfit, a young man that looked to be in his mid-20s came to greet us at the door. Extending his hand forward and smiling, the butler said, "Please come in." "Thank you, Chris." Nodding his head towards the butler who seemed to be named Chris, Noah entered the room followed by his two lackeys. Shortly after, following Noah's lead, Leo, Ram and I also entered the room. As I stepped into the living room of the apartment, I was immediately left speechless by the grandeur of the place. With a mixture of endearingly vibrant colors matched with the nicely decorated room, the arrangements of the furniture and plants made this modern and multifunctional living room come to life in an instant. The cotton white walls and the dark wooden floors acted as a blank canvas that further emphasized the color introduced by the furniture and accessories such as the paintings on the wall and the green plants placed by the sides. Best of all, a large window at the end of the room enabled the light from the sun to freely illuminate the room, creating this brilliant veil of light that warmed the colors of the room. There also seemed to be a second floor as by the side of the apartment a wooden staircase could be seen. As I admired this room, I couldn't help think back to my new room. This penthouse apartment was by far a lot better than the room that I had just moved into. However, I wasn't jealous. After all, thinking about the monthly rent price of this place made this place look less attractive in my eyes. "Ah, Noah, are these the last batch?" Just as I was finishing admiring the place, walking forward, a youth with a gray suit and white t-shirt came to greet us. "Yes." Pulling his gray blazer forward lightly, the youth raised his brow as he spotted me standing next to Leo and Ram. "Oh. It seems like we have someone new here." Nodding his head, Noah calmly introduced me to the youth. "Yes, he is a new student that has just arrived today. His name is Ren." As Noah was introducing me, I observed the youth next to him from head to toe. Aside from the obvious penthouse apartment, another reason I could tell that he was from a prominent family was his clothes that seemed to be made by top-end designers. His face was rather handsome as his skin seemed to be devoid of any pimples or imperfections. The most notable feature of the youth were his pair of eyebrows that were akin to a sword's edge as they made him look sharper and more commanding. As I was observing him, the youth was similarly observing me too. Shortly after observing me for a couple of seconds, smiling, the youth looked at Noah. Thereafter, after seeing Noah nod, the youth smiled brightly. "So this is the new student. Great." Extending his hand forward, with a friendly smile on his face, the youth looked at me and said, "Welcome to the Manticore building. My name is Gerard Lim, and I am currently in my third year at the Lock." Similarly smiling, extending my hand towards him, I shook his hand and introduced myself. "Right, very nice to meet you. My name is Ren." "Haha, great, great." Shaking my hands for a couple of seconds, I soon noticed that something wasn't right as a cold glint flashed past Gerard's eyes as the aura around him erupted. KH. Surprised, I immediately realized what he was doing and put on the greatest performance I could muster. Thud. With one knee on the ground, I fearfully looked at Gerard from the ground. My hand shook shortly after. KH. What's going on? After a couple of seconds, seeing the shock and fear in my eyes, letting go of my hand, Gerard laughed out loud as he helped me up. "Haha, I was just joking, there is no need to look at me so seriously. Patting me on the back, he along with the others laughed out loud. Haha, what a nice prank. Haha, that was funny. Standing up, nodding my head towards Gerard, I thanked him for helping me up. Thank you. Rank. During that brief moment that he exerted his strength, I noticed that his strength was rank. Just a tidbit stronger than me. But that didn't matter. All I needed was a couple of seconds and his head would be rolling on the floor. Haha, sorry about that prank of mine. Here, why don't you join the others? It was only after I got up that I managed to spot a crowd of students standing on the second floor of the apartment. It also seems that Leo and Ram, who were with me moments before, were both escorted upstairs moments prior. Yes. Nodding my head, I pretended to still be shaking from the incident and slowly walked upstairs. Slowly walking upstairs, from the corner of my eyes, I managed to see Gerard nod to Noah and the others in satisfaction. Spotting them from the distance, the corner of my mouth inadvertently pulled up. Just you wait, I'll pull an even better prank on you later. One that you wouldn't forget for a lifetime. Going up the stairs, I joined the rest of the students that were gathered in the room. I soon spotted Ram and Leo standing quietly in the corner. Without hesitation, I joined them. Moving towards them, as soon as they noticed my presence, I found them both quietly moving towards me to check if I was alright. Hey, we saw what happened, are you alright? Are you hurt? Smiling, I shook my head and reassured them. Haha, nothing to be worried about. I am fine. I wasn't lying. Although Gerard's rank was indeed higher than mine, his pressure wasn't actually affecting me that much. As I thought back at Gerard, who was still downstairs talking to his lackeys, staring at Leo and Ram, I started probing. Right, this Gerard Lim guy, why is everyone so fearful around him? Isn't he just rank? Although that is indeed an impressive rank, for a third year that's rather, how should I say, lackin'. Just as I was about to finish my sentence, to my surprise, I found both Leo and Ram putting their hands on my mouth as they tried to stop me from speaking any further. A look of panic appeared on their faces. Do you want to die? Taken aback, I couldn't help but look at them in confusion as I asked. What's wrong? Quietly glancing towards his left and right side to make sure no one was paying attention to them, lowering his voice, in an almost inaudible whisper, Leo slowly said. Don't ever mention anything regarding his talent again, or you might find yourself in deep trouble. Deep trouble? Nodding his head, Leo solemnly looked at me as a trace of fear flashed past his eyes. In an even lower tone, he quietly said. One time a student made a similar mistake to yours, as he made fun of Gerard's rank. Do you know what happened next? Shaking my head, I asked. What happened? Slightly biting his lips as he moved his head closer, Leo quietly said. 3 weeks after the incident, the staff from the lock found him dead in his own apartment with a suicide note neatly written on the corner of the desk. Opening my eyes wide, I looked at Leo in shock. A suicide note? Nodding his head, unfazed by my shocked expression, Leo continued. Yes, and the strange thing was that even though everyone knew it was Gerard who was responsible for this, as the school and the authorities couldn't find any evidence of it being a homicide, the case was ruled as a typical suicide case. However, the reason why everyone knows that it was him who did it, is because shortly after, the student's family also died by the hands of a series of strange accidents ranging from car crashes and cardiac arrests, everyone dead. Who? Listening to Leo recount what Gerard had done, I couldn't help but exhale out loud. Even his family was targeted. Thank God I didn't act rashly, else things might have become serious. Scratching the top of his nose, in a solemn voice, Leo said. Trust me when I tell you this, but Gerard is crazy, he is not right in the head, provoking him is like asking for yourself to be killed. Listening to Leo speak, the frown on my face deepened as I couldn't help but softly mumble. Psychopath. To openly kill a student just because they made fun of his talent. Moreover, their parents too. This guy was beyond redemption. Gerard was not right in the head, and everyone in this room understood that fact. Perhaps this was why everyone was so scared of him. Seeing that I understood, sighing in relief, Leo added. Yes, so please refrain from ever mentioning what I just told you to not mention. Nodding my head, I reassured him as I switched the topic. Alright, I'll be careful, but what's his background? What kind of background does he have? I mean, for him to be able to hide the evidence so cleanly, it must be quite a big background. Hearing my question, both Leo and Ram looked at me strangely. Thereafter, Ram joined in the conversation as he asked me with a hint of doubt in his voice. You really don't know? Shaking my head, I denied. Nope. I really didn't know. This man was not someone that appeared in the novel, nor that I ever remembering writing about. Therefore, it was only normal that I had no idea about him. You really need to inform yourself better. Looking at me strangely, lowering his voice, Ram started speaking. Gerard Lim is the only son, of the #1 pharmaceuticals company WV Pharmaceuticals, who is said to be worth over $100 billion in value, a giant amongst giants who recently have seen a major market share increase in the potion market. Raising my brow, as Ram was talking, my head quickly snapped in his direction as a certain word caught my interest. Did you just say WV Pharmaceuticals? Nodding his head seriously, standing beside Ram, Leo once again spoke as he warned me about the consequences of provoking Gerard. Yes, so be extra careful and try your best to not pee. However, contrary to Leo's wishes, as he tried to lecture me, his words went from one ear to the other as the corners of my mouth threatened to pull themselves upwards at any given second. Massaging my chin, I couldn't help but think back at an incident that had happened not so long ago. I see. So Gerard is the son of the chairman of WV Pharmaceuticals. The very first company I bet on during my first 2 months in this world, and the ones that were responsible for Tobias' church death. This was starting to get more and more interesting. The more I thought about it, the more the corner of my mouth inadvertently pulled upwards. In the end, even though I tried to hide it, a large smile appeared on my face. What an interesting piece of news. What a very interesting piece of news indeed. It seems like I was going to be pulling a big prank soon. The Author's POV. Chapter 138, Moving Out, 4. WV Pharmaceuticals. It's been a while since I heard of that name. Because at that time I was in desperate need of cash, I practically sold most of my stocks. Should I have saved it? Yes, most likely. Do I regret it? Not really. After all, it's not like their value shot up by that much. I would have probably have made a couple of million more. Either way, the fact that Gerard was the son of the current chairman of WV Pharmaceuticals was a pleasant surprise. And when I mean pleasant, I mean it in a very interesting way. If I played my cards right, I could probably kill multiple birds with one stone. Thank you for gathering, everyone. Talk of the devil. Walking up the stairs followed by Noah and 2 other burly individuals, Gerard calmly walked towards the middle of the room. There were approximately 50 people gathered here on the 2nd floor, and all of them seemed to be first years as they all had an azure blue blazer. Calmly observing everyone present, raising his hand, Gerard tried to gather everyone's attention towards himself. As soon as his hand raised in the air, the room instantly became quiet. With his 3 lackeys glaring at everyone present, everyone immediately shut up. Noticing this, smiling at everyone, Gerard calmly started speaking. Once again, thank you all for coming this weekend to the weekly meetings I have established. I hope that it doesn't bother any of you as Gerard was speaking, every word that came out of his mouth went from one of my ears to the other. The reason why I wasn't paying attention wasn't because I wasn't interested in what he said. Well, I wasn't interested, but the main reason was because of a particular person in the room. More precisely, a young girl who quietly standing in the corner by herself. She had a rather petite figure with semi-long hair and bangs that gently covered her eyes. She looked extremely shy as she avoided eye making contact with everyone. Ava Leafs. It seems like my trip here wasn't in vain. Although I was initially put off by Gerard's forceful show of power, now that I found Ava, my anger subsided a little. Calmly observing Ava from the side, I thought back at the files that Small Snake sent me. According to the files he sent me, Ava Lefes came from a pretty well-off family. She was the 6th child of the family and the only one with the monster tamer profession. Although she wasn't neglected at home, because of her profession, she developed a sort of inferiority complex over her siblings who in their own rights, were quite talented. Although the files had a bit more information, those were the key points I took notice of, and observing her from the side, I could tell that the information was accurate. From the way she avoided everyone and seemed very shy, it was apparent that she didn't have a lot of confidence in herself. This was definitely something I could work with. Clap. Clapping his hands once, snapping me out of my thoughts, Gerard smiled brightly as he got to the main point of this meeting. All right, I will keep it short. I'm sure you guys know why I called you here, right? As soon as Gerard posed the question, instantly silence enveloped the room. Raising my brow and noticing the strange tension in the room, I soon spotted every student in the room helplessly looking at the ground. What's going on? Staring at everyone before him, Gerard once again spoke. This time his voice was colder and more authoritative. Did you guys hear what I said? Please hand me a timestamp. One per person, please. Hearing the word timestamp, I couldn't help but tilt my head in confusion as I glanced next to me where Leo and Ram were. Lowering my head a little, I quietly whispered. What's going on? Glancing at me, understanding something, Leo pulled me closer to him and quietly whispered. Alright, since you're new here you don't know much about what happens here. Essentially, each week, same time today, we are gathered here by Gerard and we are to give him one of the 2 timestamps that we are given each week. Frowning as I was listening, I glanced towards Leo and quietly asked. What's a timestamp? As I asked, I couldn't help but curse at my own lack of preparations. Honestly, I should have probably have done more research on this place and the people living here. Although there were over 1,000 people staying in this building, I should have taken note of all the important people beforehand so that I could have been more prepared. For example, considering the fact that there were only 50 people gathered here, I figured that this wasn't the only group that coerced students into doing something that they didn't want. There were probably many others with a similar group of students, blackmailing them into handing them something important, which in this case seemed to be the so-called time stamp. Placing my hand on my chin, I made a mental note to myself. Find everything about this place, from the leaders to the rules and anything that with regards to how this place operated. Only when I had enough information would I be able to quickly come up with countermeasures, or at least be prepared for what was to come. Well, in my defense though, with everything going on with Angelica, things just passed my mind. Moreover, with how busy Small Snake was these past few days, asking him to research all of the people here would be basically asking for him to die. This time, I had to do it without relying on Small Snake. Here, this is a timestamp. Taking out a green-colored card from his pocket, Leo showed it to me. Taking the timestamp from Leo's hand, I calmly observed it. The card seemed to be the same size as a credit card and apart from a few patterns on it, it didn't look anything special. Just like a regular card. As I was observing the card, from the corner of my eyes, I managed to spot students taking out a similar colored card and handing it to Gerard and his lackeys. Staring at the students lining up in front of each lackey, handing the card back to Leo, we quickly lined up. As I lined up with them, Leo quietly pointed towards the students who were handing in their cards. Right now just observe what is happening. Since you're new, you don't have to hand them a timestamp, but from next week you must give them one of the 2 timestamps you receive each week. Pausing slightly, and seeing the confusion on my face, he calmly explained. Regarding timestamps. To summarize what a timestamp does, it basically is an access card that enables people to gain access to the time regressive machine. Abruptly turning my head in Leo's direction, I repeated. Time regressive machine. Frowning slightly, Leo asked. You don't know what that is either. Shaking my head, I placed my hand on my chin as I fell into deep thought. No, I do know. I'm just surprised by the fact that this building has it. A time regressive machine. Of course, I knew what it was, a virtual machine that slowed time down. It had a high degree of realism and through the neuron-enhancing liquid provided in the capsule of the time regressive machine, humans were able to develop a machine that made time flow much slower compared to real life. It was the perfect machine for students looking to increase their strength in a short time. However, there were obvious downsides to this machine. 1. They were expensive. The neuron-enhancing liquid required rare ingredients to make and was difficult to mass produce. 2. Low supply and high maintenance cost. Moreover, they couldn't be used for prolonged periods of time as that would put heavy strain on the brain. I knew about the time regressive machine as there were a couple of them in the Leviathan building where Kevin was. However, what I didn't know was that this building had one too. A machine that allowed someone to train inside of a virtual world where time was slower. The benefits were immense. Although it wasn't useful for helping students improve their rank, as only the brain was functioning faster whilst the body was flowing at a normal time, it was very useful for students who were looking to improve the mastery of their arts. It was understandable as to why Gerard was willing to go this far just to collect the timestamps. I mean, for untalented students like him, this was like a lifeline for them. Alright, we are done. It didn't take long for Gerard and the others to collect all of the timestamps from everybody present in the room. In fact, it only took a couple of minutes. With no one protesting as they just handed their cards to him and his lackeys, everything went smoothly. Moreover, from what I observed, this seemed to be happening everywhere as everyone present accepted this situation like it was normal. 1, 2, 4, 7, 37, and 51, perfect. Counting the timestamps in his hands, a big smile appeared on Gerard's face. Thereafter, looking at everyone in the room, he casually dismissed everyone present. Thank you very much for giving me your timestamps. I won't take any more of your time, so you may go now. And just like that, everyone that was present in the room quietly descended the stairs and made their way out of the penthouse apartment. Let's go. Tapping me on the shoulder, Ram and Leo quietly followed everyone out of the apartment. Looking back at Gerard for a brief moment, turning my attention back to Leo and Ram, I couldn't help but ask. That's it. Glancing at me from the side of my eyes, Leo shot back. What more do you want there to be? Opening my mouth, I tried to say something, but I eventually relented and followed them out of the building. Never mind, I guess this gathering of his is only for the time passes. Pretty much. As I got out of the apartment with Leo and Ram, my attention was once again drawn towards Ava, who was not far from where I was. However, although she wasn't far from me, I refrained from talking to her. It wasn't the right time to approach Ava just yet. With all of the information that I had gathered from this meeting, a plan had already started formulating inside of my head. One that, if executed properly, could solve a lot of the issues I was currently facing. Although it wasn't a short-term plan, the wait was going to be worth it. After all, you can't topple a king in one move. Right. The Author's POV. Chapter 139, Tryouts, 1. Clank. Saying goodbye to Leo and Ram, I quietly went back to my dorm. Thereafter, I sent a quick message to Small Snake with regards to WV Pharmaceuticals and threw my phone on my bed. Sigh. As a sigh escaped from my mouth, sitting on my chair in front of a large spacious wooden desk, I took out my computer and booted it up. So far, this was what I gathered from the small conversation I had with Ram and Leo on my way back. The current Manticore building was ruled by the stronger, more influential people, and taking advantage of the fact that there is a time-regressive machine, they forced and coerced weaker students into giving them their time passes. In a way, this was pretty much how gangs operated. It was sort of cliché, but with this world being filled with clichés, I wasn't really surprised. Taking a small notepad from the drawer of my desk, I immediately summarized the information that I had gotten from them. I first started writing about the social hierarchy of this place. From what I remember that they told me, there were 5 people I had to watch out for in this building. And according to Leo and Ram, these 5 people, because of how influential and powerful they were known by everyone here as the 5 Tyrants. Through their connections and parents' fame, these 5 people ruled the Manticore building with an iron fist. Gerard Lim, WV Pharmaceuticals chairman's son. Romelu Connell, both his parents are A-ranked heroes, and work under Platinum Rank Guild. Adria Forsetti, son of the Elder of Gladiatori, Platinum Rank Guild. Jessica Pandev, daughter of one of the school instructors. Gabriella Lemus, daughter of branch manager of Ashton District Bank, one of the largest banks in the city. As I looked through the list of names, apparently, I was quite lucky to be under Gerard's rule. According to what I heard from Leo and Ram, he was the nicest of the lot. Although from what I've gathered they didn't kill as Gerard did, what they did was even worse. Torturing you to the point that you wished that you were dead. Be it through targeting your family or anyone that was around you, as long as they didn't like you, they would immediately subject you to intense bullying and include your family in their nonsensical acts. They were all practically psychopaths. I wasn't really sure how these people even existed, as there is a clear boundary between arrogant and insane, and this was on that level. To be called the 5 Tyrants because of what they did was understandable. From the way they behaved and pressed people, they were nothing short of tyrants. Worst thing, because of the connections they each had, working together they managed to secure this ironclad rule that basically prevented any of the students present from voicing out what was happening, meaning that they had free reins of this place. Unless your background was something they couldn't handle, if they deemed you to be their target, you were pretty much done for. Taking note of this information, I knew that eventually I may be implicated in this nonsense. I had to act before that happened. Browsing through the internet with my laptop, I looked through each of their backgrounds in more detail. Whenever I saw something interesting, I would quickly write it down on a small notepad that was next to me. From time to time I would also stop and ponder for a couple of seconds as the gears of my brain started moving. Many different plans started formulating in my mind as I briefly glanced through their profiles. I was not having any of this. The reason why I moved in the first place was because I thought it was going to be a better place compared to the Horned Sheep building, but it seems like I was too naive. I was initially only planning on dealing with Gerard, but after hearing what Leo and Ram had said, I changed my mind. They all needed to be removed. Not only because they were going to be interfering with my training and daily life, but also because it was a necessary measure I had to take in order to make Ava join my group. Thus, with my notepad open, I took a large piece of paper and started creating a mind map with 5 large squares by the sides, each representing one of the 5 tyrants. Although I didn't have enough information yet, with all that I currently knew, I started creating connections and links between each member. Though I wasn't planning on acting anytime soon, preparing myself earlier was never a bad thing. Thus, as different plans and connections started formulating inside of my mind, I quickly got to work as I tried my best to come up with a foolproof plan that would achieve my goals whilst maximizing my gains. Playing with the pen in my hand, I softly mumbled to myself. Tut, 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 I hope you don't blame me for doing this. After all, I am just doing this for self-defense. Blame yourselves for threatening to ruin my daily life. Class A, 25, Lock. Yawning out loud as I stretched my arms in the air, I wiped the tears that had formed on the corner of my eyes. If I said I wasn't tired, that would be a lie. Having spent most of yesterday going through all of the information I could find regarding the 5 tyrants, I only got around 4 hours of sleep. I was understandably tired. Clank. Entering the class like usual, Donna calmly walked towards the podium of the class. Thereafter, placing all of her stuff down, she took out a tablet and did the register. Rank 1, Kevin Voss. Yes, present. Rank 2, Melissa Hall. Present. Rank 3, Jean Horton. Present. Propping my head with my hand, as I listened to Donna, I calmly observed the classroom. Kevin and the other were sitting in their usual seats on the right side of the classroom. It was the usual sight. Kevin was talking with Emma, Jean was with Troy and Arnold, Melissa was going through a bunch of papers, and Amanda was staring at Donna with an emotionless look on her face. Everything was pretty much the same as it was during the first time I had come here. Although if I did have to point out a notable change, it would be that I was pretty much on speaking terms with most of them. I was no longer a nameless nobody in their eyes. Which I didn't really mind at this point. With everything that was going on, their connections were indeed quite useful for my future plans. Rank 197, Ren Dover. Present. Hearing my name being called, I quickly raised my hand and responded. Staring at me for a split second, Donna looked back at the tablet and checked my name off. Thereafter, she continued doing the register. Rank 209, Ruben Nasri. Like that, for the better part of the first 5 minutes of the class, Donna did the register. Thereafter, after finishing the register, placing the tablet down, and glancing at everyone in the class, Donna spoke up as she announced. I wanted to inform you guys that the tryouts for the intra-academy tournament have been pushed to tomorrow morning and that all of the individuals who were previously chosen by me to be prepared. Hugh. Sitting up straight as I stared at Donna from above, an audible gasp escaped from my mouth as I looked towards Donna in confusion. Soon after, a wave of whispers resounded across the classroom. What? Why did it suddenly move? What's going on? Wasn't it supposed to be in another couple of weeks? Looking around, I could see that I wasn't the only one that was caught off guard by the news, as almost everyone present felt the same way. And their reaction was understandable. I clearly remembered Donna saying to me last week that there was still a month left before the tryouts. How did the time suddenly go from a month to a week? Noticing the commotion that the announcement had caused, raising her hand, Donna's eyes shone for a split second as she spoke up. Please be quiet and let me explain. Thereafter, as her voice traveled through the ears of everyone present, every one of the students speaking found themselves unable to move as their minds went blank for a split second. Soon the room was once again enveloped in silence. Brushing her hair to the side as silence returned to the classroom, Donna casually said as she continued. As most of you know, the tryouts were supposed to happen in a couple of more weeks, but due to some unforeseen circumstances, we have no choice but to push it to tomorrow. This was not something that was decided on a whim, but it was something that all of the heads of the departments have agreed on during the last meeting we had during the weekend. Pausing for a second and glancing at certain people within the class, me included, Donna continued speaking. So for those of you that have been selected beforehand, please meet me at the arena grounds in Section G tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. where you will be joined by the rest of the candidates from the other classes. Any questions? Stopping there, Donna looked around the class and pointed towards a student. Yes. Raising her hand up, one of the female students stood up asked. Miss Longburn, if we participate in the tryouts, what about the register for the classes? Hearing the question, Donna kindly smiled. You don't need to worry about your attendance as the professors have already been notified in advance. Sigh. As I was listening to Donna answer questions, a sigh inevitably escaped from my mouth as I buried my face in my arms. You know what? Whatever. As I had put a time skip in this part of the novel, I had no knowledge of any of the circumstances happening right now. And honestly, even if this deviated from the original plotline, I wouldn't even be surprised anymore. With everything that had happened to me these past 5 months, I now knew better but to not be surprised by an unforeseeable change. Fool me once, shame on you; fool me twice, shame on me. Well, I did get fooled more than twice, but that was beside the point. I no longer should just think something will always go my way. There will always be something that will go against what I predicted. It was just how life worked. And knowing this, I decided to just go with the flow and adapt to any of the changes that were happening around me. I guess you could say that this was my own way of maturing. The Author's POV. Chapter 140, Tryouts, 2. Looking towards the sky as I covered my eyes with my arm, I couldn't help but yawn. The sun was exceptionally bright today, and even though it was early in the morning, 8 a.m., the sunlight was brightly illuminating the surroundings. Arriving at Section G, I was immediately greeted by a large crowd of students. I'd estimate that there were a total of 100 first years alone. They each stood on the upper areas of the arena as they all looked below where the platforms were located. Usually, the platforms would have had many students sparring and fighting against each other, however, today there was no one present. It was a strangely odd sight. After looking at the platforms of the arena below for a couple of seconds, turning around, I soon spotted Donna, who was in front of the representative members of our class. Although I couldn't see clearly as I was still quite far, I spotted around 12 students sitting behind her. Leisurely making my way there, I soon was able to see the identity of the members, and lo and behold, apart from a few, they were the usual suspects. Kevin and his group. Hurry up, you're the last one. Spotting me from the distance, Donna quickly nudged for me to come over. I'm late. Checking her watch, Donna added. Yes, by a full 7 minutes. All right. Secretly clicking my tongue, I increased my pace. Hurrying up, I soon arrived before our group and sat down on the ground. Thereafter, taking out my MP3, I put my earbuds on and played some music. It was too early for me to be socializing. Moreover, it seems like I wasn't the only one that felt that way, as almost everyone was busy doing their own thing. 10 minutes after I started playing music, appearing in the middle of the arena below, an imposing man wearing a black instructor uniform calmly looked at the audience before him. Thereafter, his booming voice reverberated through the whole area as he warmly smiled and introduced himself. Welcome everybody, my name is Sean O'Leary and today I will have the pleasure of hosting the tryouts for the Intra-Academy tournament. Stopping there as he waited for everyone to turn their attention towards him, Instructor Sean clenched his fist and raised it in the air. Thereafter he started speaking, and with every word he said, his voice became louder and louder. Young aspiring heroes, this is the chance of your life. If you are able to shine in this tournament, not only will you bring honor to the Academy, you will also bring honor to yourselves and your relatives. This is the moment that all of you have been waiting for, the chance for you to spread your name far into the human domain. Let them know about you and your splendor. Pausing for a second and glancing at every student present, Instructor Sean's already loud voice boomed even louder as it reverberated throughout the whole arena, resulting in the handrails shaking. Instead of looking for guilds, make the guilds look for you, and what better way than by shining in this year's edition of the Intra-Academy tournament. So rise to the challenge and show them just what you're made of. Stopping there, raising both hands in the air, his imposing figure basked underneath the sunlight. After a short silence, staring at the instructor's imposing figure in the middle of the stage, the whole stadium erupted in cheers and applause. Wah! Yes. We will definitely join. We will do our best. With my mouth half open, I took off one of my earpieces as I looked towards my left and right where students could be seen cheering everywhere. My face couldn't help but scrunch up as my body involuntarily shook. Seriously? What was that just now? Did no one notice the fact that he was purposely posing to make himself look cooler? Was I the only one? What in the world did I just witness? Scanning the audience before him, and seeing everyone pumped up as a result of his speech, the corner of Instructor Sean's mouth pulled upward. Dramatically raising his hand in the air to stop everyone from talking, the instructor continued as his voice became more solemn. I will skip with the unnecessary information and get straight to the point. Because of some unforeseen changes, as most of you know, we have decided to push forward the tryouts. I know some of you may not be ready, but we simply had no choice, and for that, we apologize. Pausing for a second, Instructor Sean carefully glanced at everyone present. Thereafter, he subtly lowered his head in an apology. After a couple of seconds of silence, looking back up, he once again started speaking. This time, his voice was much brighter. However, don't be demoralized. Take this setback as a lesson. Never take anything for granted. Situations might change when you least expect them to, therefore what you need to do is adapt and persevere through the setback. Only then will you truly be fit to be a hero. Scanning everyone in the room present to make sure they understood his message, Instructor Sean looked towards his left where an old man stood. Clap. Shortly after, seeing the old man nodding his head slightly, Instructor Sean clapped his hand once and said, "All right, enough with that, let's get back to the tryouts." Rubbing his nose, taking out a piece of paper from his pocket, Instructor Sean started reading it. As he read the paper, his tone started becoming more monotonous with every passing second. It was apparent that he was only good at improvising. We will shortly be separating each year, and from there, we will once again split you according to your classes. Each class will compete with another class from the respective year, and the matches will be displayed on the large monitors above. Pausing and pointing upwards where 4 large monitors that were each the size of a large truck stood, Instructor Sean's monotonous voice continued to ring across the arena. This examination will take part in the virtual world, and thereafter, based on performances, the teams that perform the best will directly be chosen as members for the tournament. Pausing there to make sure that everyone understood, Instructor Sean started flipping through a couple of pages before he resumed speaking. Today's trial is simple. It will be a 6 versus 6 code breaker competition. One of the main competitions in the tournament. The rules are simple. All you have to do. Listening to the instructor speak, I couldn't help but roll my eyes. How can someone's personality change so much? Going from being an overly dramatic individual to this monotonous and boring one. He must really hate boring stuff. Anyhow, that didn't matter at the moment. Currently, he was explaining the rules of the Codebreaker game, and as I had made the game, I already knew the rules, hence why I wasn't paying attention. The rules were simple. It was sort of like Capture the Flag. No, it was basically like Capture the Flag with some twists to the game. Each team, through the virtual world, would enter a map which was selected at random by the professors, and from there, each team, in order to defeat the other team, must insert a specific code on a metal pillar that they each had to protect. Sort of like the flag from Capture the Flag. Once the code was put in, the team would win. Simple as that. However, there was a catch. In order for someone to break the code, they needed to first get the code that was given to a team member before the competition started. The person holding the code was not selected at random, as the team could choose who held the code before the game started. Thus, the goal of the team was to first get the code before making their way towards the other team and breaking the code by inserting it in the metal pillar on the other side. Therefore, the hardest part of the game was not inserting the code, but actually finding the code, as one of the 6 people present had it. To make matters worse, there was also a time limit for the game, making this trial even harder as defeating a person one by one was put out of the equation. Alright, that's enough from me for today. I will let your instructors take over. I hope to see you when the time the real tournament comes. I wish you all the best of luck. Finished with what he was saying, Instructor Sean smiled once again at the audience before he turned around and left. A wave of applause followed suit. Clap. 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 After Instructor Sean finished speaking, taking out her tablet, Donna calmly looked at her students. There were a total of 12 students representing our class, and apart from the usual people, there were a couple of new faces, me included. Pursing her lips, Donna scrolled through her tablet before looking at everyone and saying, "There will be 2 A25 groups, and before you say anything, the teams have already been decided beforehand, therefore no, you can't choose." Pausing and pointing towards certain individuals, Donna continued. "Now, the teams are. On my right, Melissa, Kevin, Troy, Emma, Timothy, and Christopher. You will be the first team. Staring at the people whose name she had just called and seeing them nod at each other, Donna looked away and continued. On my left, Jean, Amanda, Ren, Arnold, Donald, and Zach. As the members of our group were being announced, my mouth couldn't help but twitch as I realized who was part of my team. I was fine with Amanda, but Jean and Arnold. Oh, dear. Unbothered by my distress, after making sure she got the names right, putting the tablet down, Donna calmly explained. You 6 will each be competing against a team from another class in a 6 versus 6 scenario, and from there we will judge your performances. Considering that there will be a lot of matches today, you only have to fight once. However, even if you win, it won't mean that all of you will be chosen. So if you want to make sure you get selected, you must think of an adequate strategy first and make sure that you crush your opponent. Pausing there, Donna solemnly looked at everyone present before saying, That's enough from me. Huddle up in your teams and come up with an adequate strategy. I have high expectations from you. Finished with what she wanted to say, Donna briefly glanced at everyone present before leaving. Sigh. As I watched Donna leave, an exhausted and tired sigh escaped from my mouth. Brushing my hair to the side, I glanced towards my group in the distance. My eyes soon interlocked with theirs, and a bitter smile appeared on my face. Now how am I going to deal with this?